So thank you, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Gant, Board of Education. I'm excited to present this evening on our community school strategy related to strategic priority 2, community collaboration. So our goal of focus this evening is goal number 2, which is to engage family, community members, and civic organizations as active partners. One of the 3 objectives within this goal is to increase the opportunities for families and community engagement in student learning. And the specific initiative that we will be discussing tonight is the development and execution of a comprehensive community school strategy, also referred to as a whole child strategy. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the community school strategy. While the strategy may seem new to CCSD, as Dr. Thomas said, it has been discussed for several years. In fact, it's listed on the first page of our initial charter system application that part of our goal of being a charter system was the development and implementation of community schools. What we're calling community school strategies a lot of time is known as a whole child model, whole child framework. I know I've heard the board mention this terminology several times, so a community school strategy is the same thing. Those terminologies tend to be used interchangeably. So the goal here is to implement a strategy that truly impacts every student on every campus and every classroom. Our process to this model was fueled by the sense of urgency in addressing the specific needs of each of our students. The timing of this strategy was really inspired not just by our contract, but also by the social and emotional and mental health needs of our students. A lot of it was, of course, also sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic. While we're beginning to explore more of this strategy, the pandemic hit, and then we started to see more school systems, publications, and funding being allotted on the state and federal level, highlighting this strategy as a research-based way to alleviate some of the negative impacts that we would see in students post-pandemic. So once again, CCSD was at the forefront of exploring something before others, but we happened just to implement it just a little bit later. So this evening, you'll hear about where we are in the process. However, essentially, just know that if we implemented the strategy with fidelity, we should see positive impacts on our students, including discipline, behavior, attendance, and ultimately improvements in our overall community. So where are we with this strategy? I don't know if it's, you mind? It doesn't like me anymore. Oh, perfect, thank you. So where are we now? Well, first, we have an amazing team. Most of our team is sitting here to my right adjacent. We have 7 community school organizers. We have a community school director. We have one of our translators, interpreter here, and then our family and community engagement specialists. So many of them do the work of implementing this strategy. I like to think of our CSOs like project managers, because again, I want to emphasize the word strategy. It takes a lot of work to do this the right way. It's been implemented and researched over 65 years, and so I'll talk a bit about what is all the work that they're having to do this right, and just to make sure that we do what we can do best for our students. But even though we have 7 cohort schools, I'm proud to say that we actually serve all 21 of our schools. Each of our CSOs has a focus school. That was a school that agreed to be part of the pilot with the Georgia Department of Education, but they also support 2 other schools. So they're each supporting 3 schools total, which is all 21 of our schools in the district. Those schools who are a part of kind of the phase 2, they're basically laying that foundation, so that way they'll be prepared for full implementation and certification in future years. As you can imagine, when we met with our school leaders, there's a lot happening in the pandemic, so some felt they were ready to do it, others had other priorities at that time, and also as a pilot program, we don't want to do too much too big at one time. So when we think about how do we measure it, mainly it's around the positive impacts we'll see for students. However, as it says here, we'll also see increases in student academic progress. Parent participation at school is one of the first things you start to see happening because of our impact on family and community engagement. And then our Georgia State health surveys, which will come out later this year, those survey data should show that parents, students, and staff feel more engaged. They feel like they understand what their purpose is and what work they're doing inside of our school system. Other ways we measure the impact mainly is through, of course, again, increased student achievement, but also we should see a decrease in student absenteeism and behavior. That's mainly because the work that our CSOs are doing is partnering with local community organizations, keeping strong contacts with the families to discuss and talk to them about why it's important for their child to be in school, but then understanding what are the barriers some of our children may have or our families may have to children attending on time every day. They also will see an increase in family and community collaboration because that's one of the tiers that Ms. Sarai will talk about in a moment. So we've done a lot of work. Well, they've done a lot of work. The department overall is focusing on increasing access right now. Our language service department is looking at increasing access for our EL families or English learners. Our CSOs are in the process now of doing data collection and asset mapping, which if you've ever done data collection and asset mapping, it is a very complex process. But under Sarai, they are working on getting that process off the ground. And then our family community engagement specialist is working on a timeline and a comprehensive parent university plan to support our families on the ground. So in reference to performance, okay, thank you. In reference to our performance measures, one, I just wanted to show you all how we're measuring impact. The first is the number of MOUs, memorandums of understanding and strategic partnership agreements. So we do have a targeted list of organizations. Very excited that this year we've been working really diligently to develop a district partnership process and database system that's seamless, that allows our community organizations, faith-based institutions, businesses to partner and work better with us, that allows us to measure the impact of the work they do, whether it's through ASP, in-school programs, summer programs. So how do we work with our partners? How do we measure that engagement? And how do we see what kind of impact that's happening? So we have a targeted list, about 135 and counting. We are going to be meeting with these organizations, getting contracts, MOUs on file, partnership agreements with those who may not have historical like grant writers and stuff. We don't want to make it a barrier. It's just so that we can have something in place that's sustainable, that's resistant to turnover, and those partnerships continue to develop and cultivate regardless of who's in the role. Our performance measure 2 is the number of students reporting engagement. Right now, based off our 2019 data, 72% of our students, 82% of our parents, and 81% of our school personnel reported feeling engaged, so our goal is to increase that by 3% this year. So we look forward to that data being released at the end of this school year. Performance measure 3 is all around the students participating in our after-school programs. In 2021, that number was right at 5,848 of our students. Our monthly attendance was only 26% district-wide. And so for this year, we've been working to increase attendance, to find ways to figure out what those gaps and those barriers are. So we want to increase that by 10%. So Dr. Phillips and Sarai have been working, communicating with families, working with those ASP coordinators at the school, because we want our students not just to enroll, but actually to attend the programs that are happening after school at our elementary and middle schools. And then our last performance measure is the percent of students attending parent conferences. Our fall attendance was 76%. We are still waiting for data from a few of our schools, but we do have 15, so we're right at 67%. And our goal is to get to 90%. And for those who know, we used to rock a 90% or above parent conference attendance, and so we want to get back there. We think we can do it, but it's about encouraging parents, it's about removing barriers, finding ways that we can make sure our parents are attending that, and that our students are going to discuss their child's progress. So we're excited to hopefully increase that to 90% within the next 2 years. This last one is actually not strategic priority 2.1. It is in the communications objective, but because we do have language services in this department, I did want to highlight that 76% of our families who were surveyed, who are ELL, those are English language learners, did report a positive impact from our language service department. I think this is a really big deal. We want our ELL families to feel engaged, to understand the material that we send out, not just from the district office, but from the schools. And so our goal is to increase that satisfaction by 10% next year, and really ultimately we want to get to 100%, and we think we can. The work that Mr. Voorhees has done, formerly in his role, and Ms. Katie Greenwood and Anna Camacho are doing. We've installed signage at all of our schools in the front office. There's technology, and so now individuals who don't speak English as a primary language can come in and receive the same service as a person who speaks English, and so there's no gaps. They don't have to figure out who to find, how can I find a translator, it's right there. There's a number, there's an iPad, there's everything they need, so that gap no longer exists. So we're looking forward to getting that data. And of course, there's some, thank you for the snaps, there's some existential data on the screen as well. Here's just a screenshot just to show you how many. Our translation interpretation department has done well over 150 interpretations and 275 translations. Just so you know, translations, written format, interpretation is verbal. So our team, again, has been very active this year. This data is broken down by schools, so you can see which schools and departments have requested most of the services. And again, we're working with our school leaders to make sure every time any communication is sent out, even if you have less than 2% of EL families, that you're sending it in languages that that child and their family understand. So all of that was a department overview. And now I'm gonna scale this kind of down into a more narrow focus around the community school strategy. And again, this community school work has been together for a while. However, in order to truly move the needle in child development, we needed to adopt a research-based strategy that was proven to work. So in 2021, we approached our school leaders to determine their interests. We had a presentation by the National Coalition for Community Schools, as well as the Georgia Department of Education's Whole Child Department. Principals were invited to attend that and express their interest. And again, we had several principals express interest in being part of cohort 1. Several said, of course, again, wanting to wait with the pandemic and seeing what the impacts would be. So we're proud to have those 7 schools. That's where our CSOs are now. So they are placed in the schools. Their offices are there. They don't live here at the central office. They live in the schools. They have offices working with staff and principals every day. So when we discuss community schools, again, we're talking about a strategy. And so I had to underline and bold it because community schools isn't a program. It's not an initiative. It's not an organization, though some organizations have community schools in their title. We're talking about a strategy that brings together community organizations, businesses, and resources for the better development of student achievement. And so when you think about those non-cognitive factors that our children are dealing with on a daily, we know what happens academically in the classroom when we think about numeracy and literacy, but we also know there's a lot that happens outside the walls of our schools, 16 hours outside of our schools, not counting weekends. And so this strategy is all about building trust with local community organizations, civic organizations, and businesses to leverage their resources to better serve students in our classrooms. And so that's why our CSOs are really focused on that data collection piece. That's why when we talk about the strategy, you'll hear us talk a lot about ongoing data collection, because I'm sure everyone here knows your circumstances today may look completely different next week. If you have housing insecurity, your economic access has changed, maybe your transportation has changed. So we have to always be collecting that data, talking to the people that we serve, which are our families and our students. This strategy ultimately really balances the focus on meeting the individual needs of a student. So for years in education, we've talked about how do we meet the individual need of a child. And so this strategy is one of those ways. And as it says there's no numbers, but the second to last bullet point, I was really excited last year when RAND published a national study that said that community school strategy is one of the few research-based proven strategies around equity in schools. And that's really because we're taking this old age approach of give everybody everything to really focusing on many of those students who have been historically marginalized by race or by class within our schools. And so again, that requires data, that requires conversations, that requires courageous conversations, and that's what these folks behind me are doing every day. So the strategy is based off of 4 pillars. And so I'm just gonna give you all just a brief overview because Sarai will tell you a little bit more about the specifics. So the 4 pillars of the strategy that our community school organizers are carrying out is collective leadership, which is really developing a school-based team, which right now we have our LSGTs. They'll have an advisory committee as well, to really look at what's happening holistically within that school. The second tier is active family and community engagement. We wanna make sure that our families feel that they're active partners, that they're invited. It's not about who's at the table, but who's not at the table. Whose voices are we missing? How do we get to those voices? So I know some of our CSOs have been out in the neighborhoods, they've knocked on doors, they've walked across streets. So how do we get folks involved? How do we get that voice? So sometimes you can't say, come to us, we have to go to you. The third one is the expanded and enriched learning. So that's our after-school program at 21st Century. We have amazing programs in our school system, and how do we make sure that that's aligned to our academic standards? So how do we work with our partners to make sure our programs are enriching the learning that our children just had during that day? So it's a supplement to that. And the last one is integrated student support. So while that doesn't live in our division, we work really closely with Dr. Watley's team to make sure that those student supports as far as social work and psychology is all tied in together, and we're looking at the mental and health resources or health needs of our students. I'm not going to read this because this is actually from the presentation we did in October to the board to show you the alignment of the community school strategy pillars to our CCSD strategic plan. So this is just a reminder that, again, not a random strategy. We didn't just come up with it. I imagine most people don't sign up to take up such a big task, but it is aligned with our strategic plan areas 1, 2, and 3. And so we are, again, aligning what we do in our division and as a school system to that plan. I'm a big fan of logic models. That may just be the half nerd in me, but when we look at the progression of this strategy in a logic model, we really start to look at what we're investing, and not just investing as far as dollars, but as far as people, participants, processes. So what you see on the left is one of the things you have to do in a community school strategy is you need the people, right? So we have our people here. You have the 4 pillars. One thing is all the research says you can't just do 2 pillars. You have to do all the pillars and integrate them together to make it work. We need partners, right? We need people in our community who are willing to work with us, and that requires building trusting relationships. That just doesn't happen at the central office. It has to happen at the school level. Many people here, especially in our community, have a heart for a particular school, and they want to work with that school. And so how do we tear down any barriers to that entry? What you'll see is the strategies. Again, that's the communication that these fine folks behind me are doing on a day-to-day basis with families, with community organizations, with their school principals, to really talk about the needs of the school. They're providing professional development and learning around what a whole child model means, and they're really providing access to health and social services. So then on the back end, short-term and long-term outcomes and impact, because ultimately we don't want to adopt a strategy that's ineffective, right? So the outcomes and impact of this model should be exactly as stated before. Students are attending school consistently. They know they have a person in the school to rely on. They also have accountability, usually from an outside external partner, whether that's a sports team, an athletic club, maybe it's an arts group, maybe it's grandma or aunt who's at home saying, call me if my child is absent, but how do we build those strong relationships and those ties? And then we also see that schools are partnering more regularly with schools and with businesses and community, and they understand what the value of those partnerships are. And it's not just sponsorships and funding. You know, we love to ask for money, but sometimes it's volunteers, it's mentors, it's reading buddies. Sometimes there's alignment to workforce development. So how do we partner in a way that meets the needs of both our institutions? And then the long-term impacts takes a little bit more time. No strategy is implemented and clean overnight. I always say that, you know, when we talk equity or we talk things outside in the community, you know, we didn't get into this overnight. It's not going to be an overnight fix, and so it does take time. But within the long-term outcomes, you should see students academically succeeding, more college and career ready, and ultimately their needs are supported, not just by us as a school system, but outside in the community, because everyone's on the same page. So we're truly building a coalition of people working together. So what makes the strategy work? I'm just going to go to the highlighted parts. It's research-based. Again, research, data. It's local needs. So it's not us putting a blanket approach and saying all 21 schools get the same thing. That's why we have CSOs at their particular schools. We won't have time tonight to talk about all the different things they're doing, but we will provide that in the board update, and you can even see the differences between schools on what those needs are. You'll see that alignment of, oh, I see why you're doing this, because this school may have this particular need versus a different school. So we won't go through that tonight because of time, unless you want to add 20. Nope, okay, we don't. So we won't go through that tonight. But all the 4 pillars combine for this strategy. So we need the personnel. We have to do a comprehensive needs assessment. That is a very complex process, but that's why we have these folks here behind me. I think the beauty of our CSOs is that many of them are not just of this community and from the community, but they truly believe in the community. And so I think they have really strong connections and networks. They're really maximizing their relationships to make sure that we work closely with our community organizations and civic organizations to help our students in our schools. So I'm just really proud of the work they've done. This is just some of those outcomes I talked about before. And I didn't mention, I do have notebooks for everyone if you just want some reading at night. It is a lengthy notebook. Okay, you can grab one tonight, but there are notebooks available that just have all the research that we did even prior to engaging in this work. And you'll see some just amazing studies and case studies that have been done, those outcomes. And even there's a section about districts like ours. And so we just aggregated which districts resemble ours, not just as far as student enrollment, but as far as demographics, socioeconomic class, language barriers. And so you'll see each tab will tell you how does this strategy actually work for us here in Clark County Schools. So pick up the notebook. It is about 230 pages, but that's some light reading for some of you all by the moonlight. And of course, we'll be open for any questions you may have. So this is my last piece before I pass it over to Ms. Soraya. I just wanted to show you all the steps, and it's kind of a simple graphic. So what the team has really been focused on, and I just want to highlight that they've been in their positions really only 4 to 5 months, some of them. So, I mean, they're still fairly new to the role, but they have really made it through steps 1 through 3. I would say we're on steps 4 and 5 now, and as you see, that does take about 3 to 4 months if you combine it together. What Soraya and the team has been working on is what does that process look like? How do you do comprehensive stakeholder mapping in a community such as ours where there are pockets of people who are engaged and pockets who are disengaged? And so you have to find new ways to get the voice of the people that you're trying to meet. And so whether that's through Athens Wellbeing Project data, social service data, labor market data, how are we using that data to create really a map of what's happening, and then you overlay that with our achievement data. So as you can imagine, it's complex work, but that is what the team is being trained to do. But we are kind of in that 4 to 5 range. I say that to say what you'll see, what Soraya is going to present is our team here isn't just stopping at the data, and that's the part that's exciting. The strategy is, it's a step-by-step process, but during this process of learning this, they're actually doing stuff in the schools at the same time, right? So as we know, there's been a lot of gaps and barriers that just were highlighted because of the pandemic, and so they're providing support to other departments, other team members, working closely with their principals, the counselors, just to find ways that they can get involved and engaged and help just other staff members with their work while they do this. And so normally in most strategies, you just stay focused on this. That's it. Get the data, get the data, get the data. But our team, again, I think being of and from this community and caring, they also have now taken the time out to kind of supplement that time to create programs and do initiatives, which Soraya will talk about now. So I'm going to pass the torch to our community school director, Ms. Soraya Felgenhauer. She has just a few minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, to talk to you all a bit about the specific work of her team, and then we are happy to entertain questions, or if there's a spreadsheet, we can do that as well.
He's the clicker. Good evening, board members, and buenas noches to my friends as well. Dr. Lawrence Harris has presented you guys a lot of information about community schools and about the work that we are unpacking and we bring into the community and the schools. I just want to highlight a few things because like Dr. Harris said, we're not only about the collecting the data and finding the information, building our capacity, but we're about doing the work and make sure the schools are already feeling that impact and the students are already knowing not only who we are, but that we're here to support them in their success. This is a quick video. We're not going to show you guys tonight just because of time, but please feel free at any other time. It's just a very interactive way to show what community schools is and what community schools can do to not only our community, to each school specifically. Because like he mentioned, this is not a cookie-cutter approach, but we are looking for specific gaps and specific barriers from each community school, and how can we move those barriers, and how can we build bridges and make sure that what we implement and the partnerships that we build are directly impact each school and the needs that they have. This is, like he said, our North Star. Oh, he also does my pages, isn't he sweet? This is also, we're just a very good team. This is also, like he also mentioned to you, is our North Star. This is everything that we do, everything that this amazing group of people are doing every day is aligned to those pillars. And everything that we do and everything, the work that we do every day, they know how much we are reminded that we do not walk far from those goals and what those pillars do, and the work that we do is aligned to each and every pillar every day. So if we can click on the link, just to show a little bit about integrated support and what is specifically in very common language what that is. The first one, integrated student support. And I just highlighted real quick just for you guys to have a quick understanding of what everything that we do that aligns to that pillar is specifically students cannot focus on academics until their non-academic needs are met. So we do understand that it's a whole child. We do understand that when a child comes to school that they come with a lot of things that they bring from the community, from home, and we need to address those needs as well to make sure that every child is prepared to come to school to learn and to succeed and to show truly their potential potential. So we definitely, a lot of the things and strategies and programs that we put in place is to address that whole child, not only the child that comes to school from 8 to 3, but the child that goes home and also needs support in other areas that we need to address so they can be prepared for the next day. The next one is the extended and enriched learning time and opportunities. I'm working very close with Dr. Phillips. She's the new manager for after school. And make sure that we're building programs that are robust, programs that bring in really some exciting, opportunities for kids to, expand their horizon, extend their learning, and engage in things in the community that they can even give back to the community in some of the projects that they get involved in. The third pillar is active family and community engagement. We're doing that a lot. And something that I want us to focus on is that informed and included families are better equipped to help their kids outside of school. And it's proven that students have higher attendance rates and increased academic achievement when their guardians, parents, families are involved in their education. And that's why we not only include every parent, but every bilingual parent, every family that is, working with their students and making sure that they are empowered, they're welcomed in the schools, and they have information that can align with the, as they support the schools in the things that the kids not only learning, but the opportunities that we can give them as they even go when they beyond high school. And the last one, collaborative leadership and practice. One of the things that we need to remember is everyone is on the same team with the same goal. The board members, the schools, the community, the parents, the families, the children, we all focusing on one thing, is the success of every child when they leave school, that they're prepared to be a child and a citizen of the 21st century. These are some things that, as the CSOs and I work very closely together, that we create an action plan and we identify priorities of the 7 cohort schools. So those are the schools that right now are identified as the cohort of the schools that we are pursuing, the certification. And I work very closely with the DOE and make sure that we are following the framework and the map that they give us. We're following that very close, aligned with those pillars, but on the same hand, we're making sure that we are aligned to the administration, to the conversation with the children, with the parents, and the community about the needs of each school and how can we, again, build bridges and move barriers so those students can have the opportunity to really be engaged and really have the opportunities to increase their academic skills and also, thank you, and also be prepared to, be involved in the community that they live. Here's some specifics, just a few examples that you guys can see, not only the pillar, but what are this great, amazing group of people doing every day to make sure that we not only align to the pillars, but we bring that impact to each school community. So you have a few of those examples right there. And one of the things that we're very excited right now is the CCD Food to Community. We are in a partnership with Chef Manny to send refrigerators to the elementary school, and it's gonna be filled with food that is done by our kids, and they're gonna give back to the community. Because those refrigerators will be filled, any family, any staff is free to go and get those sample of food that's done by our kids. They can come and get it for free without judgment. So that is a great, great thing that we're trying to start, and we're gonna build that and of course expand to other schools, after, we kind of gather the data about how can we get better in that initiative. Another one, when it comes to the expanded and enrichment, we are bringing partners to the schools, to after schools and 21st century programs that can be exciting, that can address, like Girls on the Run is a great example of it, that we bring that program next year to our schools where they address the self-esteem with girls, that address wellness, and address that teamwork, that they train all year, and at the end of the year they run a 5K to show their teamwork, to show that they learn about wellness and how to, take care of themselves, but also to build self-esteem as they work together. That's a great program that we bring for after school next year. Another thing, the alliance with the active family and community engagement. I think you guys have heard of our villa that is happening right now. We are right now on our 4th session. I have received great feedback from the community members that have volunteered to be a part of the first cohort. They are very excited. They want to know about us. They want to participate. They're very excited about knowing how we work and how can they be ambassadors in the community about the things that we put on the community, the initiatives that you have, how can they speak loud, in collaboration with what's happening here at CCSD. And the last one, of course, is strategic alignment community schools. One of the things that is happening again is all the advisory committees that we are building. We have one that I run because I want to know what the community brings to the table as we collaborate, as we find our focus, but also each cohort school has their own advisory committee that can, again, bring focus to our work and make sure that we align to the pillars, but we also align to the needs of each school and every child in those schools. Dr. Harris have talked about this slide where we at this point as we work with the DOE, and I'm very proud to say that we are not only work closely with them, but they're very proud of us because the work that we're doing is not only sitting and collecting data, but we are already on the ground and we're already impacting children. I reached out to the DOE and I asked them to give us some feedback about the work that me and my team are currently doing, and that's what they said about us. So we are being noticed by the DOE and by the work that we have implemented so far. I have 2 testimonies. Oh, I don't know, I don't think we have time. That's what I'm kind of listening here to the side. But that's something that I really, really would like you guys to hear at some point, because not only I wanted to hear from the DOE, I wanted to hear from the schools that we are part of the cohort and how they're feeling about the work that we're doing and about the collaboration that we're putting in place. And there's 2 examples of 2 schools that can give you great feedback about the work that we're doing, how it's being felt by the schools and how it's impacting the children directly. And to close, I would say for us to always remember that this is a strategy that's going to take time, but we are committed to that work. And community schools address the needs of students in a holistic way, not just their academic achievement, but their overall health and well-being. So we are committed to work and collaborate with school to make sure that we are addressing the whole child, because that's what matters is the whole child. Thank you for your time.
And I'll just say really quickly, I had a request of the team for the end of the year, and for a couple of reasons it didn't work out, but now we have it in place for the beginning of the year. I know some of you heard about the request for dads on duty last school year, but what I asked this team to do, and they did an overwhelming job, was go out into the community, because again, this is about community schools, to have people to come in and help in our hallways at the end of the year with behaviors. And I said, let's hit the community. So they went to barbershops and beauty shops. Okay, on your one day off, can you give me 4 hours? And they set up a schedule. They went to area coaches and said, you know these kids. They went to area ministers and said, can you, or your youth minister? So people that we knew had a relationship and commitment. So our community school organizers jumped out there and they found and developed a whole schedule of people to go into our schools. So we will be able to use that now at the beginning of the year. And with us kind of being proactive, we can work with them before school starts on what to do if a kid becomes aggressive. What do you do if you notice something about child abuse? So how do we prepare them? But that to me is a prime example of community school work, that they went out, they found people in the community that they knew connected to these kids, that families respected, that children respected, and then these community individuals were excited to come in, work in our buildings, and so now they already have a plan built out for next year with a schedule that we can just plug in, and schools will know that they have volunteers coming in to support them in supporting our kids. So I just appreciate, and they jumped on it within hours, so that's just an example of the kind of work they're doing. Yes, I'm done. Go ahead.
So you all, this is amazing. This is what we want to see. This is what we want to know. Thank you for everything that you're doing and for this presentation. If there are ways that we as a board can help support you, let us know about it. The one question that I have, and you don't have to answer it tonight, but I did notice that you're working on getting Winterville Elementary and Cleveland Road on the Athens-Clarke County transit bus line. I would just want to know, are there other schools with the ability to be on the bus line that are not, so that as we speak with the commission and with the mayor, those are things that we can help support and inquire about. So if those are schools that we need to do that for, please let us know. But thank you so much. Your work is not going unseen, and we appreciate what you do.
Ditto. This is my thing right here, boy. They always say my leg, people watch and say my leg shakes. I've been trying to, but it shook tonight. It's shaking. I'm so excited. Thank you all for the work that you're doing. I am going to resign from the board tonight and join your team.
You have to fight Dr. Gant. She already wrote me a note when she quit.
We all can't leave. We all can't leave. But that work that is just awesome. I'm so excited for our children and for our families. And again, thank you so much for all that you're doing. Very excited about that bus line on Cleveland Road and Winterville. You know how I feel about those schools. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you to the team.
We-
Thank you all
we-
for being here tonight. And
We have a
for what
couple
you all
more.
do.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm sorry,
No,
Dr. Thomas.
no, because it's like a lot of them. Can you all just raise your hands if you work in that department? Thank you all for being here and for what you do every day. We appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is my last question to be able to, my last meeting to ask questions, and probably the last time I can ask you questions.
I have policies tonight, too.
Yeah. And I do, I mean, obviously what was said before, I can date this process back to, actually, we first set up a family engagement program back in 2007, 2006, and I came in 2008 to head up that program. And it was, you know, I mean, you've got a staff who can really get the job done. I mean, there was so much work to do, and we just didn't have the staff to do it. From that experience, there was one thing that I became very much aware of, is the unevenness of our schools, and the unevenness of the how accepting school leadership how their acceptance can vary so much, and so it's bound to happen because every school leadership has their own sense of priorities and their own way of doing things. And what I'm concerned is to make sure that in those schools that are not, or that school leadership that aren't getting it, or maybe they're down here and some schools are up here, you know, that we have an ability to bring the superintendent in particular, and the cabinet in particular, can bring those resources to talk to the school administrators and make sure that this is seen as a priority. Now, clearly, we put a lot into this department, and so just wanting to make sure that all schools are fully engaged and not unevenly developed. So that's just a caution. I did want to ask you, Dr. Harris, if the ACC government, you know, you were at that meeting in January when they put the $7 million on the table. Now, what that actually meant in terms of youth development, you know, they had some ideas and they've since fleshed it out. We were kind of caught, I think the board was caught off guard because we hadn't looked at that type of collaboration to that level. And certainly you didn't have $7 million to say, okay, we're, you know, like a poker game, I match you. Have we been able to coordinate resources with the county government? Because I know that they just passed their budget, and I know there's money in there for youth development. And do you, is your department interfacing with them to a degree that you're satisfied?
Satisfied. I mean, I think we do work well with the county. Soraya sits on the youth development committee. It's called a committee. User group. So she was appointed or voluntold. And then I sit on the East Side Library group, the broadband Wi-Fi group. So we have representation on most of their user groups, mainly from our department. So we're having those conversations. How do we get internet to all citizens of Athens? Again, the East Side Library, the youth development facility. So I can say we're engaged there. I can't speak to the ARPA funds just because that's not in our lane, but at least as far as our collaboration, we do work closely with the county.
Yeah, I just felt like that with the ARPA funds that we have the opportunity, and we had, and maybe we still do have, to transform our communities if we have that collaboration. One other point that I wanted to make is that do you feel like, I mean, and we've talked about this before, you and I have, and I've brought it up in board meetings too, about the whole question of facilities. Of course, that doesn't fall under your department. And I'm talking about everything from buildings to buses to playing fields. And you know, before you leave your position, I hope that there's something set up so that there's a lot of communication with the facilities, because I know we're getting a new facilities director, and so I know that things are changing in terms of personnel, but I really hope that there is a full use of our facilities. And I just want to say that I'm so excited by folks being brought into our schools, our community, and I think that's a tremendous thing. And I think that for our community school organizers to be out in the community, I think that's fantastic. One other question, and maybe this is, Dr. Thomas can answer it too, but the family engagement specialists, are they under another department?
I can actually answer that. No, they're under our department. So
They are under your department. So in actuality, you've got you've got a kind of a double team approach where you have the family engagement program, and you have these community school organizers.
we're bringing it all together.
Bringing it all together. That's fantastic.
So one group's working in the building and doing things inside, and then the community school organizers are working in the communities, but then they work collectively
That is
as a team, even with our counselors and
Social workers.
social workers. So one group is kind of focused in-house, one is doing the things outside, and then they come together.
And our FESs are building that capacity to parents to work with their children. So, you know, homework help, how do you understand what's happening with report cards, parent engagement nights. So our family engagement specialists are really focused on how do you bridge that gap with all parents at each particular school. And so our CSOs are again, I think of them as like a project manager. They're bringing family community engagement, shared governance, extended day learning, and student supports all together around one comprehensive. So they work really closely with their principals, which I think to your leadership question, our principals are bought in because that's part of the reason we have these 7, and I think, you know, they work really closely with them about what are the priorities of the school, what's the data saying, and what do we need to do to address it. So I know we weren't able to go through all the things, but I really want you all to read the report tomorrow because you'll see some really, some just things that, you know, were identified at certain schools that we didn't know that had nothing to do with our operations, but sometimes outside our walls that these folks have been able to help make better for our kids and our families. So they're just filling those gaps.
And there's only one thing I want to say, and then I will hush up. And that is, Dr. Thomas, I want to give you credit for this. We had, I remember meeting you at J.J. Harris, and we were working with family engagement with Clara, who was one of our best family engagement people. But we had just a skeleton, we had a very low commitment on the part of the superintendent. And I'm not putting anybody down, everybody has their own priorities. But your priority in this program, I give you much credit.
This is, yeah, I want to echo, I know Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis have sort of been here to see the different, changes and priorities. I do have a few questions, but I'm just going to stick to one or two. One was about, Dr. Harris, you mentioned with the translation and interpretation services, we had a chart up here that, told us like what schools use them. And I was just curious, are you seeing, what other languages are people, requesting? That's sort of one. And then two, with our, communities that may have like either some type of hearing impairment or deaf and hard of hearing. I know you mentioned like signage and things like that. Are we getting requests from those communities and individuals as well?
So I can answer the second part of that question. I'm going to have to call on my colleague, Alex.
And it doesn't have to be answered tonight, because I have plenty more, and I'll just shoot them to, yeah.
But yes, so Spanish is our second most widely used language from Language Line and for our interpreters and translators. And then we do have several other languages, some, I think, South African languages, some East Asian languages. So it's not just Spanish and English, which is why very purposeful not saying are just Spanish-speaking families, because it's not just Spanish. When it comes to signage, yeah, we probably have two of the most inclusive people I know on this team. So signage is in multiple languages. There's instructions. It's been emailed. They have a little note card. Every ELL family now gets a card that gets mailed to them and sent to them, so it tells them exactly how to access in their language. So it's whether you're deaf and hard of hearing. I think that we work with the Dr. Watley's team and Dr. Anna Morgan. So she's been really helpful in like even translating now. We translate all of our IEPs into the language of preference for that family, which is a lot of work. If you've ever seen an IEP, it's a lot of pages. So I mean, I think yes, it's again, and we're not perfect yet, right? I mean, we're not, but I think the 76% shows that our families, our ELL families are feeling the love, and they're feeling engaged, and they feel appreciated. So I mean, it's work on the team, but I think they believe in the work. And again, we're trying to get to 100%, right? So we're 76 now, we can get to 86 for next year, and then we can creep up to 100, so. But we can pull a report, Dr. Thomas, of all the languages in the district that we get requests for.
Yeah, and I was just curious, so if it's cumbersome, don't worry about it, but I was just more so curious. And then secondly, and this may be more of an ongoing conversation, but when I looked at like some of the strategies that you all were providing, the inputs, like where you talked about the inputs and then the strategies, it seems like there's a lot of overlap, like with like social work and like, or at least intersections between like social work and maybe to a lesser degree behavior specialists. Like I saw some professional development listed on there as well. And so, yeah, I'm curious, like, how often do you all work with the social work team? Or is that overlap more so just overlap and you all are still sort of doing your other independent work? Does that make sense?
And I was gonna say, we even started on a chart, like a matrix, because we were even like, okay, who does, because we want to provide that wraparound support, but we don't want people stepping on each other's toes or redundancy. So one of the things that Dr. Harris has started working on is kind of a chart of kind of who does what, at least as your primary area of focus for your work. But then also, you're bringing up a good point about meeting. I know some of those groups meet at the school in what we call like a kid talk conversation. So in their buildings, the social worker, the counselor, the family engagement specialist, I'm not sure if the community school organizers are in those meetings or not, but sometimes, so they all do come together to talk about what's going on with a particular child, and then who can kind of help to triage out, who can do what part. So, is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just exciting to see. It sort of reminded me like at the beginning of the behavior specialist world, where you have this team where you build like so much capacity, to be able to work in schools, out of schools, in communities, out of communities, throughout clinical services. And so it was just really It felt really good to see, you know, building capacity, to build capacity with the team, so.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a big part of the work too, right, is the capacity building, the data piece. I think that's why this team impresses me so much, is because I know, even for me, you have to almost be very singular focused on like the data. And I know for me, like even when you see in the notebooks, everything's to start with the data, but they're doing the data and they're also doing activities to support. So it's a value add for the rest of the teams at the school. So again, yeah. So.
I am so excited to hear all of the things that you're doing and how they are absolutely connected to our strategic plan. My greatest fear in the world is that some alien is going to come in and snatch our school systems away from us. That's my only fear. But I am really delighted to see the connections to exactly what we're trying to do in our strategic plan. That was not evident to me before, and so now that you've put it in writing, it is much easier for me to see and comprehend. Actually, I'm a visual person, so that's really helpful. I did want to just, again, kind of double back on the CSO role, the FES. That was an excellent explanation on that. And then for years, we've had Family Connections Community in Schools neighborhood leaders. Is there any connection between what you're doing and what the neighborhood leaders are doing, and also what you're doing and the ACORE for the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government is doing? Because because I only hear sound bites about what each of them does. I'm just curious if there's any collaboration among those four entities that are essentially community engagement.
Yes, so we collaborate really closely with Family Connections, communities and schools, so neighborhood leaders. Mr. Tim Johnson sits on our advisory committee, and so figuring out ways that our neighborhood leaders can work closely with our CSOs. The county was really explicit when they funded those positions, is that they didn't want them to be school-based positions, though they're part of our attendance zones or they're zoned that way. Their focus is really on the external community side, whether that's SNAP benefits, ESL, you know, whatever those families need in those neighborhoods. So our CSOs will work closely with them. Full transparency, I'm not familiar with the second thing you said, the ACORE.
Yes.
So I can't talk to that, but I could ask the team later if they are working with the ACORE, because I'm not sure what it is.
It's fairly new in the last couple of years that I think that the county created the ACORE. I think there are 30 of them, and they're all across the county, and they do specific projects around particular areas of concern. So again, some of the things that you're running into in your neighborhoods might be something that they could be also working on as well. So thank you for that. I still have all my questions, and I'll look at them again when I get home.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I got one. So I just want to echo what was said earlier. This is exciting. Thank you for your leadership on that. I do appreciate that under the priorities, that it is not just school, that the initiatives or the ideals don't just correlate with the school succeeding, but the community succeeding. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the growth of this department, because I feel like this is new, like the department is new. But I do have a question, and you don't have to answer it now because it's going to come off as a suggestion. I hope, if there's not, I hope there is there cross communication in regards to funds being used for the Better Everyday and the CCSD Connect? And mostly where it includes the expertise of your team, where clearly the focus is on research, connection, and data, to make us, and if CCSD Connect, and I know that's not you, but if CCSD Connect continues, if there will be some collaboration, some cross-collaboration, if there's not already, where we are including the information gathered by this department to make sure that we're making informed financial decisions that benefit our children. So pull a question out of there. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And please make sure you get your notebooks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we will move forward with item 9, and this is our financial report. underneath the financial report are the tentative FY '23 budget approval, and the March 2022 financials. I do know that we had a call meeting that we were hoping to do, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and we weren't able to do that, to have a full discussion on our budget. But I do see that that document has been we've been busy in there. And so, keep asking questions and seeking answers as we move forward to, and we still have budget hearings, still. But, so Dr. Thomas, I'm gonna turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gannon. We have tried to stay on top of those questions. I believe most of them have been answered now. I can ask Cabinet to review that while they're sitting here this evening, and Mr. Schooneman is presenting. If you have any that haven't been answered, you can try to respond to those, but I believe the majority of them have been responded to. Mr. Schooneman is at a training, but he is with us virtually, and he has been waiting anxiously, as you all heard him. Am I on mute, he said? So he is here and ready to do tentative budget approval presentation, and then he will also follow that with our March 2022 financials. 1 second.
While they're working out the audio, do we want to go to policy or want to take a quick recess?
You want us to go to policy? It's up to you all.
Yeah, you want to take a quick recess, or you want to go ahead and move forward with policy?
Let's do something. Let's keep going if we can.
Okay.
I don't want to be
We're gonna
here
go
till
get Ms.
midnight.
All right. All right, so Dr. Thomas is grabbing Dr. Harris. I think he went to take a break or see his team out.
Okay.
I said, Dr. Yeager said, let's keep moving, and so the next is policy. And so Dr. Thomas went to get Dr. Harris, because I think you went to decompress and...
Sorry, I'm also a little nauseated, so I just had to, so I'm sweating.
If you want to,
No.
we can take a recess, and while they get the...
I will be departing after this.
Okay,
So
we're gonna take 5. We'll take a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back, and if they've worked our audio, we'll do that, and if not, we'll start with policy. Okay?
Wow, that must have came from my mother. Salt.
Hi, I'm Stacy.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I will be able to share my screen from this. Okay, all right, Tess, I can you hear me?
Too loud.
Am I really loud? Test. Is that still loud, Lisa?
Okay, so we read.
All right, test, test. Can you hear me?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much to,
I can hear this fine.
okay, perfect. Thank you to our audio team for helping us work through that. We are then going to actually be at number 9 instead of moving forward to policy. And so the first is the tentative FY23 budget approval, and then the March 2022 financials. Dr. Thomas, Mr. Schooneman.
Yes, ma'am, we will turn it over to Mr. Schooneman.
Thank you. Hello from River Street in Savannah. What I'm going to do tonight in this budget presentation, we're not going to go through to the level of detail that we had before, but since we did not meet and have our informational session and have a chance to kind of discuss the changes with you, then I told Dr. Thomas what I thought I would do is just go through the few slides and highlight the changes, especially with the revenue side of the budget, since we met a month ago. Overall timeline, we're still looking good. First meeting in May. I'm presenting the tentative budget. Ideally, it'll be approved in a week. And once that's approved, we will hold those budget and millage rate hearings before the initial budget is approved in June. So that's our ideal timeline. For our revenues, our QBE, last time I had spoken with y'all, I had estimated it was a little bit higher. The actual initial allotment from the state came in at $72.4 million. So once again, that's at a 0% growth. I think their estimate was 7 additional FTEs or 7 additional students. So really just a flat 0%, really consistent student population from year to year. The question is, okay, we are going to receive more QBE in FY23 than we have in FY22. And that's because one, TRS, it's a slight increase from 19.81% up to 19.98%. And then also the $2,000 raises that they gave to all staff is permanent next year for certified folks. So taking that into consideration, the net budget for QBE, the state portion of our budgeted revenues, is $72.4 million. The other section, that has not changed, so we're still sitting at 11.4 or $11.5 million there. Our local property taxes, since we spoke last time, I think I had estimated it was about 15%. We got the final digest figures, and it's going from 4.89 billion up to 5.79 billion. And the growth, when you're combining both reassessment as well as new growth, it's up there at 18.3%. So it is really just exploded. And every time I talk to either the tax assessor or tax commissioner, it has increased every time. And right now, the final digest figures, 18.3% growth. So what does that look like if we are, what is the value of a mill? So from 2017, based off of the tax digest, the value of 1 mill was $3.7 million. As the digest has grown each year, you can see that the value of 1 mill has grown year to year. Last year for 2021, the fiscal year that we're in right now, the value of 1 mill was $4.9 million. So we had the millage rate set at 20 mills, and that produced $98 million in school tax. So projected for the calendar year 2022 for next fiscal year budget, we can actually roll back the millage rate to 18.8 mils. We have the value of 1 mil is $5.8 million, so almost a whole $1 million more than where we're at last year. And so even if we roll back the millage rate from 20 mils to 18.8, we're going to tax a total of $108.9 million. So overall, even though we are taxing $108.9 million, we don't actually collect 100% of that. We have to account for delinquency at 1.5%. And then also the ACC tax commissioner holds back 2.5%. And then also some money for tax overpayments and delinquent payments. So net total at 18.8 mils, we're looking at bringing in $105.3 million. So year after year, all revenue sources accounted for here. all revenue is increasing 6.4% estimated. So last year's budget, $177.6 million. And this year, FY23, $189.1 million. And then over there in the right-hand column, you can see the respective change for each area of revenue. For expenditures, the only thing that we've really added since the last meeting that we had, Dr. Thomas was very adamant about adding a family engagement specialist at all schools. So in this tentative budget that we are presenting for consideration is a family engagement specialist at all schools. So we added 21 total positions here, one at each location. And that is the only add since the last time we shared the budget with you.
That gives every school a full-time family engagement specialist. Some had part-times because they could not afford with their building level funds to pay for a full-time. So I suggested that we pull that expense from having schools pay that, and we absorb that in the general budget so that there would be equity across the district where every school could have a full-time family engagement specialist and not have to sacrifice other academic programming or not be able to have a full-time person because of funding needs. So
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. This is a current year to prior year comparison of just our personnel count. So BOE, we're accounting for 9 board members. There's no change there. Classified personnel going down 12. Certified personnel going up 5 for a net change of 7. And when I did the math and calculation, that 7 of 2,107 or 2,100 employees, that's 0.3%. So it's a very flat, not a lot of change from one year to the next in terms of number of employees that we're budgeting for in total. All in all, our expenditures, when you're looking at them and separating them out between personnel, what we spend on salaries and benefits versus operating, everything else. Here is the change. So you can really see the big increase in the budget this year is on the personnel side. It's going up $10.9 million versus our operating budget going up $487,000. And in those increases, just bulleted below, you can see that we have simplified the salary schedules. We've increased hourly rates beyond $12.50. We've made that $2,000 that was added by the governor in this fiscal year permanent, and we also added a 3% cost of living adjustment to all of our salary schedules. And we also have a continued emphasis on low class sizes. And like we just mentioned, also added a family engagement specialist at all locations. So just a really high executive view. This is what it looks like. Estimated beginning fund balance, $49 million. Going to bring in $189.1 million. And then also the plan is to spend exactly the same, giving us a predicted ending fund balance at 6/30 of 2023. Of $49 million as well. So it is a balanced budget. And YouTube cut out, so I didn't hear the discussion during Dr. Thomas's presentation about the meetings, but I just wanted to go over the 3 meetings that we're going to have. And it is really just an opportunity for stakeholder feedback. We have to hold at least 2 public meetings to present the budget. So after the budget is put together, we have to present it and give any concerned citizen, anyone that wants to come and provide feedback an opportunity to do so. The other thing that we have to do is hold 3 millage rate hearings. So if we're going to increase taxes, and even though we're rolling back the millage rate because of the size of the increase of the tax digest, it is considered a tax increase. we have to have 3 public hearings also to allow those concerned citizens to provide public comment. And the tentative schedule to do that, May 19th at 4:30, we're going to do both a public budget presentation as well as a millage rate hearing. Same thing on May 23rd at 6. And then June 2nd, before the board meeting, we're just going to do the millage rate hearing portion. All 3 of these will be advertised on our website. They'll also be advertised in the newspaper. And what I've worked out with Lisa, I do anticipate folks to come out and speak, and would really like to have it somewhat structured. So just like a public comment during a board meeting, have 3 minutes for concerned citizens or anyone that wants to provide feedback to speak directly to the board about this budget. So the remaining steps before we have an approved budget, in a week, you'll be asked to approve the tentative budget. Then we're going to hold those tax increase hearings as well as budget presentations. And then once those are done, asking you to approve the initial budget and adopt the millage rate on June 2nd. I'll pause there. And if there's any questions before I actually open up kind of a more official budget document, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Mr. Schooneman, are you advocating that we stipulate that we will lower the millage rate?
So right now, with the amount of resources that we need, we can actually lower the millage rate down to 18.8 mils from 20. So it has been 20 for at least 20 years. And with a growth in our tax digest of 18.3%, we are able to provide the salary increases that we did, as well as rolling that millage rate from 20 down to 18.8.
Okay, the reason that I'm asking is that there's another way of addressing this, and we've talked about it as a board, but we've never done anything about it. And it was actually something that the county commission first initiated, and that is that this increase in the tax digest is the result of increased property values. And we have thousands of folks who are on fixed incomes or limited incomes who own property in Clark County and are not in the position to, as say, easily pay the increased property taxes. And we have talked about the prospect of going before the state legislature and giving us permission to at least neutralize these increases that are being put on our fixed income, limited income folks who own property so that they can stay in their homes. I guess I'm addressing the board, that if we're going to talk about lowering the millage rate because property taxes are bringing more than we need, then instead of lowering the millage rate for everyone, why don't we take this opportunity? It would have to be go before the state legislature, but to take this opportunity to devise a system by which, and other communities have done this, by which people who are of fixed income or low income who own property are able to stay in their homes. And the reason I'm raising this now and is that if we lower the if we go to these millage hearings and say this is our intent, is to address the needs of our property owners with low income or fixed income, and are in the process of choosing between paying property taxes or fixing up their car, then we won't be in the position. I mean, if you lower something, it's hard to raise it. It's easy to lower and say, we're going to go from 20 mils to 18 something. But then if we do what I'm saying, if the board decides to go in that direction and ask the state legislature to give us the authority to adjust the property taxes for low income and fixed folks who own property, then we would turn right around next year and say, okay, now we need to bump it back up again. So I simply raise that, Mr. Schuneman, and to the board, you know, the prospect of approaching it that way.
Mr. Schuneman?
Okay.
With the lowering of the millage rate, I'm thinking that, you know, I know like one of the significant things that the district has done and the board has tried to work collaboratively is to raise, you know, from your other presentation, to raise that lower pay. I think it was to 12, is it 1250?
Yeah.
Yes, so everybody is at, or getting it to close to 13. With the millage rate, and I don't think you would be able to answer this like right now, but I just wanted to toss it out there because I can't remember if I put it in the document, or, but with if we wanted to advocate for the employees to be at a minimum of $15 an hour, and I know it's just not that, it has a ripple impact, right? It has implications for other employees, basically. Might that be something that could be covered in that 0.2% so that we could compromise somewhere? Or you know, with the millage rate? Or are there any other areas, you know, that we keep it at 18.8, because I know that's one of the things that some of us have been advocating for, to lower that millage rate. You know, may there be other areas? I'm not sure of the total cost, and that's why I wanted to put that on your radar. And I don't know that there's a consensus there either, because I do understand what Mr. Davis is saying. I mean, it's sort of one or the other. Somewhere, you know, families are impacted, right? So if you raise that wage, and then you got families who are having to, you know, pay taxes, or, you know, are being like not just inconvenienced, but really impaired by that and hindered by that, then, you know, how do we fix that? But I also know, like, with the poverty that we have here, I think all of us know that, you know, sometimes that cash in hand, you know, can make a difference. So I'm just curious about that, like as far as estimates. Ms.
Dr.
Hall?
Gant, you had stated that you didn't know if it was a consensus. I would echo your same questions and concerns. I think even though it's a very tough pill to swallow, when I think about our duty as board members and our obligation to the school district, making sure that we have comparable wages for our teachers, for the people that work with our children, seem to be very important, especially when I look at the personnel reports and see how many people are leaving our district. And so I too have that same question about lowering the millage rate. Is there any other money in the budget, or is there a way to do that but still to bring up what we're paying our workers so that everybody has that living wage, especially from our school district, since that is how we impact our children and our families. So I echo that concern, and I would like those questions answered as well.
Yeah, and I know, like, we've done significant work with what we've done so far, and so I'm very appreciative of that. And even if it's more of a strategic direction, you know, that we want to move in, you know, stating that I know that was one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Greg, in the strategic plan, trying to get that. I think you were trying, was it 15 or 1250 that you were trying to get in there? But even if there's a strategic direction to sort of hold both of those, because both of them impact homeowners, you know, to try to keep that millage rate low. And what do we look at over these next few years, even if it can't happen tonight, you know, but what are some strategic ways that we can look at keeping that millage rate low, but then cutting, or I don't know if it's cutting the budget in other places, but being sure that we slowly raise, or intentionally, I should say, raise the salaries or the hourly wages or the day. I know with contracts, sometimes it's the day rates of some of our, you know, lower paid employees. So, Ms. Davis?
You know, I was going to say, I think too, and I know we haven't talked about, we have
Can you
not
speak a little bit louder and clearer?
Sorry, is this better? We have not recently spoken about the fund balance and, you know, how much we are doing with that. And at one time, we were anticipating an overage in that from the normal 15%. And so I would ask us to definitely consider that priority of making sure salaries are adjusted accordingly to what the county at least is doing with the $15 minimum. So that would be my number one priority. My other question actually is, in the calculation that you're doing for the 18.8% millage rate, is that assuming that, did you calculate our budget based on 18% or did you use that 20%?
Ms. Davis, to answer your question, the approach that we took was building the budget first. So looking at the expenditure side first, and then you say, okay, what are the total resources needed? You know, so we kind of considered the request and minimum hourly rate of $12.50.
Right.
You know, we went over and above and beyond that. And I think the minimum hourly rate now, I know Selena knows better than I do,
13 something.
but we went over, I think over $1 above that.
Yes.
And looking at how that kind of cascaded upwards to all other employees, when we simplified the salary schedules and we added in the $2,000, just the flat $2,000 from this year, that was an increase in our overall budget of about $6 million.
6 million.
It is really challenging just to kind of go back and recalculate, you know, try to restructure it and have a $15 amount minimum threshold. But kind of to get back to your question, you know, we looked at the expenditure side first,
Right.
and then we said, A, what are we getting from the state through the QBE formula? B, what are all the other sources of revenue that we have coming in? And then C, the last line item to consider to really balance your budget is what do we need to tax locally in order to have a balanced budget? So that was the approach that we took this year, you know, especially considering the sizable increase of the tax digest. And one thing that I wanted to point out, even though we are rolling back the millage rate, one thing I really want you to consider during these discussions is, even though we're rolling back the millage rate, there are examples of the tax increase. It's not the total amount of taxes, just the tax increases that homeowners will see given this budget. And so even though we're rolling back the millage rate to 18.8 mils, that means on a $375,000 home, a house that is valued by the county at $375,000, that tax increase is $258.30. So that's not even that's not the total amount of school tax paid. That is just the increase of taxes paid. So just keep that in mind. You know, the higher we go up with these mills, the higher the increase that we have on our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I hope I wasn't misunderstood, because I certainly, I am not in favor of lowering the millage rate. And so I do think that, you know, for this coming year, approaching it towards wages makes a lot of sense. And to bring us up to the $15 an hour. But what I'm saying is, I think in terms of, you know, we as the board, when we go to these millage rate meetings, we are going to hear from the public that says, okay, well, you've got more money than you technically need. Well, in actuality, if we do the $15 an hour, and if we address the needs of those, to at least for coming years, to at least address with the needs of folks who own property who are limited income and trying to stay in their homes, and their homes are valued at, you know, very small amounts. I don't know how to do that, but that we're doing that as well. We're looking at that as well. And so, because the tax burden, you know, the tax burden doesn't affect me. I'm not in that income where a few $100s more is going to affect me. But to some people, it would affect their home, them staying in their homes. And I don't think, once you lower the millage rate, then you're going to play heck trying to raise it up again. And I think that y'all are right, that we have an income need in this county for livable wages. So I think it's a win-win, and I'm just totally, but we need to have a strategy when we go to these millage meetings. If we're saying we're going to hold firm to 20 mills, we need to explain clearly that we're trying to raise wages, and we're also of our lowest paid workers, as well as looking at addressing those who really need some relief down the road to stay in their homes because of their limited income. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schoeneman. Are there any follow-up questions or for the board, Dr. Thomas, or any?
Dr. Gant, I do have one more document I just wanted to cover, and it might answer some additional questions as well.
Mr. Schoeneman, okay, can you wait 1 second? Dr. Yeager had a question, and then we can resume.
Okay.
I was just going to ask for a reminder of what exemptions we have currently on the books for homestead exemptions or senior citizen exemptions, and what those, I know we have something, but I don't remember what it is, and I know we've talked about doing other things, but I also don't remember what those are. It's been over a year, I think. So, I don't know, Mr. Pruitt, do you recall?
Well,
I know there's statewide exemptions, but I don't remember what we have here in the county.
Yeah, there's a table of those on the Unified Government website.
Okay.
There's about, trying to count, about 10 exemptions, almost all of which are local homesteads. Local homesteads are what Mr. Davis is talking about, where we would give something beyond the state. So there's a lot of age and income-based local homesteads that are greater exemptions than the state gives already. I'd be reading for a while if I read this table to you.
Okay, I'll take a look at the table for sure. Thank you.
Mr. Schoeneman? Oh,
Okay.
okay, I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second. Ms. Gallagher?
I got one. So when you look at millage rates and working with the county, is there like an economist that's included so that we have a clear understanding of the needs of the community when making these kinds of decisions? Because I don't speak budget very well or any of those numbers, but I do talk to people and know the impact of numbers on their lives. So, like, are we being intentional about making sure that we are understanding or at least getting information about how our decisions impact the community?
Was that a question for Dr. Thomas or Mr. Schooneman?
Mr.
maybe?
Schooneman.
Mr. Schooneman?
So when you talk with the county and all that stuff, are you also getting information about how these kind of budget decisions impact the community at large?
In terms of education, or are you talking about, what homeowners would see in their tax bill?
Yeah, just all of it, the community at large, so students, parents, residents, because so everybody in the county pays taxes, it doesn't matter if you have kids in the system or not, and they all pay into our system, so are we at least having conversations with somebody that says, here's how the decision, or this potential decision to lower the millage rate 18.8, this is how it impacts the community at large, not just the budget, like real people.
Maybe some of that, I think I get what you're saying. Some of that opportunity, even though people who may need to have input would not come, but that is like a good space for the budget hearings, is for people to really come and share those thoughts and ideas and ask those questions. So I think it's really good to encourage people in the community who are homeowners and taxpayers to participate in those budget hearings, because that is a good space to hear their perspectives on what this is like, what the impact is like for them. To say, so Mr. Davis said, for him, a couple of extra $100 wouldn't be an issue, but maybe for some, even who may not be considered in poverty, it still could be a lot if you don't have that taken out each month, as part of your mortgage. So for people who don't have a mortgage and have to still pay that, that could be an issue. Or for people whose mortgages may have to go up even a couple of dollars, that may be an issue. So having those 3 budget hearings is a good place to encourage people to come out and share what that impact is like for them and what their reality is.
Thank you, yes, ma'am. But this was put together before we had community meetings. So last year's, how did that impact people, and then taking that into consideration moving forward? But also considering the piece, because we are in the business of education, considering the piece that gentrification is real, and people are being priced out of their communities, and rent is extremely high, and like we don't have those kind of conversations. We just talk about these numbers, but all of those things impact at the end of the day student learning. And so I think we, like when we're talking about numbers and budget, we also need to remember to bring like people like into the conversation. So that's not against you, Ms. Schooneman, because I know your job is money. But just for us, like for it to be, these are real people that we're impacting, not just a budget or a balanced budget.
And you're right. And I think that the process, by design is giving any concerned community members a platform and an opportunity to come and let the board know how it impacts them. And when we're preparing the budget, I kind of look at it as 2 kind of independent steps and kind of competing factions. Is you're looking at what resources does the school district need to really push the needle? What's it going to take in order to be successful in our strategic plan? And then B, it's like, how much is that going to cost, and where are we going to get that money from? And you're right. The more that we spend, the more that it impacts homeowners, the more that it impacts our community. So, I do anticipate there being pushback and people signing up to speak, because even though we're looking at rolling back the millage rate to 18.8, it is still a tax increase of over 10%. So, if you had a tax bill of $100 last year, it'd be $110 this year. So it just keep that in mind. Even though we are rolling it back, it's over a 10% increase year to year, and that really is impactful to homeowners.
Okay, one more thing, but it's not for you, it's just in general, and then I'm gonna be quiet. At some point, I would like to see, and I said it a few times before, and I'll say it again, how, like, $108 million is a lot of money. And I think we need to be able to translate the amount of money that we receive and spend into real positive outcomes for students, not just in their social and emotional, but in academic. We should not be having very low literacy rates, and we have this much money coming in. And I know money does not fix all the problems, but we got a lot of money coming in here. We can send kids home with $1,000 and teach their parents how to read and how to read to their children with the amount of money that's coming in here. So I can't get excited about a lot of money, because we still aren't doing our part as an institution of education. That's not for you to fix, Mr. Schuneman. I just wanted to say it out loud. We need to be teaching children how to read and do math. We got a lot of money coming in. There's no reason that we're not able to do that with the amount of resources that we have access to.
So Dr. Thomas, it sounds like we've got quite a bit of work to do over the next week or so, just to make sure that this budget is in line with kind of like the values of the board as a whole. So I don't know the best way to go about that process, but right now we are looking at starting out the year at 49%. Or my 49%, $49 million. So that was going to be my next point, is moving into the more formative budget document. I'm estimating that we're going to start the year with $49 million, and that's 25.9% of next year's budgeted expenditures. So we have a very healthy reserve, and it's going to be above the benchmark that we've set of 15% throughout the year, and we don't anticipate it to go below that. So, we could, or the board could say, hey, one of our goals is to attack, continue to kind of chip away at the lowest paid hourly rates and try to increase those up to $15 an hour. I would say that the board has room within their existing fund balance to do so. There is something to be said. Once you lower the millage rate, it may be more challenged to go up. But just kind of making the point that we do have a healthy fund balance going into the year that we could use even if we kept it at 18.8. We can actually chip into this $49 million fund balance and still be safe.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Schuneman.
I want to point out one thing, and I feel neglectful that I haven't really paid more attention to it, because I've certainly been talking about it. But I'm looking at the tax exemptions now. They're on the Clark County School District, and I figure that Dr. Yeager is doing the same thing. But for someone who owns a home, they and their spouse, if they make less than $10,000 a year, then they get an additional $10,000 exemption on their home, in addition to the occupation, the homestead exemption. If I'm reading that correctly, $10,000, I don't know when that was made, but it seems like that $10,000 isn't what it used to be, and that. So I think this whole chart is just totally out of whack to current conditions.
If I may just point out, it's fairly complicated on some of these. There's 3 columns in the chart for county M&O, actually 4 columns: county M&O, county bond, school M&O, school bond, and it's differing for each. But you'll notice several of those exemptions are floating, and Athens-Clarke County is one of the counties in the state that has used local homestead to implement a valuation freeze for certain citizens as well.
I was in a forum on homeownership this past Saturday, and the mayor is
Can you
bringing
speak a little bit
forward.
louder, Ms.
I'm sorry.
Davis?
I was in a forum on home ownership this past Saturday, and the mayor spoke to the fact that they're bringing forward some additional exemptions for low-income people and income-restricted people, I would call it. And so there's some other things coming down the pipe, so I'm sure that that's not reflected in that chart.
And so I think, because I was wondering, I don't know that you've heard a consensus, Mr. Schooneman, of where the board is. I think what I'm gathering from what you're leaning towards is that it sounds like you're recommending that 18.8. And so I don't know if the board would agree with, maybe like some options. So like keeping this, but one of the things you mentioned perhaps is, chipping away so based on the feedback you've had, like I know Greg said that he absolutely opposes lowering the millage rate. I'm not sure if you could sort of share where other people are, board colleagues, but I think even after you hear that, maybe just a couple of options, and what that might look like, with the millage rate as it is, like this current budget, and then what might it look like at 20. I do want to reiterate, I do support lowering the millage rate, and chipping away, if it's this year or strategically over these next few years, figuring out whether it's through our fund balance or other areas of where we can begin to work on raising that hourly rate wage. And so if other people can at least share, and that way we can have some idea, so Dr. Thomas and her team can have some idea of what it is we're expecting to see.
I'm very happy with the 18.8 millage rate, lowering that because of inflation and where we are currently in the economy. I am also excited that we can definitely investigate, I would hope, the fund balance as a source of income for getting to that $15 hourly rate for the few people that we have left that are not there. I think that would be a really positive push for our community, given the excellent work that we're doing, and not only making those lower waged employees, giving them access to other work in the district, but again, getting them close to full time. So I know as a working parent and as a person who had 2 jobs for a long time, it would be really good to get to a place where you only have one, and you can actually do something towards supporting your family.
I'm okay with 18.8% for the same reason. If we can balance and get people to the $15 an hour, I'm good with it.
I would want more information. If there can be a balance of it, I'm definitely for that. But first and foremost, I want to make sure that we are doing right by our students and by our district before considering anything else. Taking into context, there are things that definitely happen outside of school that can affect children. But I really just want more information before I can give an opinion.
And I think that's fair, like we don't have to solve it tonight or at this particular budget, when we take action. So I think that's definitely fair. More information would be helpful.
I think it would be good to know. I think the county millage rate is at 16 or something close to that. It's not anywhere near where we are.
Dr. Yeager, Ms. Gallagher, Mr. Davis, do you have any additional feedback to add?
So I was pleased and happy to see we could drop the millage rate, because I do think it's a burden on lots of families, especially the low-income families that are trying to own a home, and to see their home, gentrification, as you mentioned, is a huge problem, and, having the millage rate drop a little bit is helpful for those families. So, but I am interested in Mr. Davis's point about, can we do something that's more directly helpful to the low-income families. And so I would be willing to look into that during the coming year, and agree with all of the points made about raising the minimum wage as well, if we can do that. I appreciate doing that, for sure. No, I don't disagree with anyone on the panel. I think we're all kind of on the same page. We're all working for the same goal. Question is, how exactly do we nudge the numbers to get that goal? And, you know, I think we can write some more questions in the Google Doc, I suppose, that are more specific. Like how much, for example, I think Dr. Blankenship might have mentioned, but I'm not sure, about how much more would it be to get everybody to 15 instead of the 13.7?
$4.2 million. We already ran the numbers because we know you, and so
But
we
you
were
know-
already prepared.
You said
And we're
four?
talking $4.2 million.
That's back of the napkin numbers, and I am not the numbers person, let's be very
Okay.
clear. I would
So
want
close
Byron
to-
to look at that.
So we had kind of looked at that end when we started and then tried to see, because again, it is the ripple effect, and, you know, we were looking at what does that mean even when you start looking at your other levels, you know, how close are you getting now, even some of your classified to certified, and what are the job requirements, you know, educational requirements, certification requirements. So we had looked at that to start with as an aspiration, so we kind of had an idea. So we can, with Byron, get that information to you all relatively quickly, because we had played with some of those numbers to start with. Because we're also in the same space, as Dr. Yeager said, we all are wanting for the same thing, and wanting to do as much as we can by our staff. So we had looked at those numbers as a dream place. So I think we can get you some figures relatively quickly.
Yeah, and I know that it'll have implications for others, so I'm not trying to like advocate for any type of salary squishing or anything like that, but just more curious.
So 4.2 million doesn't sound like a lot, actually. As Karina pointed out, 108 million coming in, 4.2 is a pretty small fraction of that. It would carve into our fund balance, which is currently 25%, and we've said we want it above 15, so it makes sense to me that we could use that. The trick is that's 4.2 million per year, and so what do we do next year?
And that's the thought, maintaining.
How do you
You
maintain
don't
that
want to
extra
have to
4
go back.
million per
You
year?
can't go back.
Yeah, it's harder to go back, so I guess that's the part you leave to the economists and the people like Byron, but anyway, it's interesting information, thank you.
So I may jump in. We did model other salary increases as well. So, you know, we looked at making the $2,000 increase this year permanent. And then on top of that, we were looking at different COLAs. So, you know, providing all salary schedules a 1% increase, a 2% increase, all the way up to a 5% increase. And we did end up landing at that 3%, you know, kind of for a couple reasons. One, if you're looking at the overall salary increase for all staff from year to year, you know, we wanted to make sure that it's keeping up with inflation. So the employees that are lower paid, they're seeing a much more sizable percentage increase from year to year. And employees that are on the higher end of the salary schedules are seeing less. But both of them, I think at a minimum, at the top end was a 6 to 7% increase. So that was, you know, definitely, in my opinion, a healthy increase. And we're trying to kind of walk this delicate balance of how much do we increase wages, you know, keeping wages competitive, but then also how much are we increasing taxes? And then not only how much are we increasing taxes, but what happens if our tax digest falls next year? It's not always going to be guaranteed to stay the same or increase every year. On one of the slides in a previous presentation that I had, it does show the change. You know, from 2002, it peaked in 2009, and then it did dip for 1, 2, 3, almost 4 years in a row. So it does decline. So if we maxed out the amount that we could spend on salaries and benefits, we would see a really challenging future if the tax digest fell, because we would have to look at doing either furloughs or then cutting wages, and that would be putting us in a very difficult bind.
Thank you, Byron, but it didn't happen when I was on the board, but I know that this board has gone through, or the district has gone through austerity, where not only did the funds coming from the state drop, but I think with our 15% fund balance, that was the one thing that kept us from having to borrow money to make payroll. So we want to definitely protect our fund balance in case of this kind of drop, but I am not hearing anything from the county in terms of the growth in this community slowing down. I'm not hearing that, and so that's good news, but I don't know what else is out there for us to consider.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to push through this tentative budget summary, just to kind of get to the end of it, and then we can move on or have more discussion. So starting out with $49 million, we've got a balanced budget. That $49 million, it is healthy. We're projected to stay above 15% throughout the full year. I'm bringing in $189 million so far with that 18.8 mills. If we look at it by source, local property taxes are accounting 56% versus state at 38%. And this pie chart, different counties is much different. So more rural counties, you will see the state figure actually being more like 55, 60%, and then the local property taxes being less. So this pie looks different from location to location, but for Clark County, overall, it has been about a 60-40 split. And especially going into this next year's budget where property taxes are increasing more than QBE, the weight of revenue by source is going to be more for the local property taxes. So the local property taxes are going to be bearing more of the brunt there. Our budgeted expenditures, when you break them down by function, 63% is going to be allocated towards instruction. And really the benchmark for the state, if we weren't, didn't have specific waivers, the Georgia Department of Audits would come in and test to make sure that this is at 65%. So the more that we increase wages, especially that aren't teachers, this number here will fall. And I just wanted to kind of make that point too, is we definitely have to keep teaching and instructional staff in this mix, because we don't want this to vary too far from 65%. When broken down by object, sorry, let me. Okay, how about now? Okay, so when broken down by objects, salaries and benefits are accounting for 85% of our budget. 14% is everything else: energy, electricity, contracted services, stuff of that nature. And I also included the two links as I had in prior years. One is the final budget presentation. That's what we're going to present at the 2 budget hearings that we have, as well as I'll have a separate millage rate hearing presentation to go along with it. But this is kind of the final budget presentation that we're looking at. And then also I have dropped in all of the budget detail. I had shared it with the board in a Google Sheet, but we have also dropped it into the interactive dashboard. Last year we had started with FY22 data, and we have added FY23, so you can toggle back and forth and look at the differences between the budget in total, or you can drill down by cost center and see the differences in amount that we're planning on spending. Same thing with positions. We got a lot of questions about, positions in different departments and different locations. Here, you can actually go and look back and forth between the 2 years and see what the total number of employees are by position description from year to year. And then finally, it also includes just the budgeted revenues as we have pegged right now. So that's all that I had planned for the budget discussion. If we have any more questions, we can do that. If not, Dr. Gant, I can move on to the monthly financials.
Yes, please move on. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Schooneman.
Okay, now on to the monthly financials. This is through March, so period 9. Our overall revenues, we've collected 80.1 or 80.2% of our revenues compared to 82.68 last year. And the reason we've kind of fell behind is, if you recall, in March, we had the state's amended budget, and they're giving us additional QBE funds, which we'll be receiving over the upcoming months. So just when we're comparing period to period, we are behind where we were last year. But overall, I know that we're going to receive 100% of what the state is pledging, and will likely exceed our revenue budget by $1.4 million. With expenses, 63.77% of our budget compared to 61.4% last year. Once again, that it's not all that concerning when you're looking at our monthly budget down here at the bottom. We're at a total of $114.8 million spent spent this year compared to where we had kind of projected to be just on a monthly budgeted figure. So overall, we're tracking below what we anticipated to spend by about $4.4 million. Both our cash and our fund balance are above where we were at this point last year. Cash, we're at $71.7 million versus $67.4. And our fund balance, we're sitting at 42.9% compared to 41%. And currently, my projection, you can kind of see the trajectory of what we think we're going to end our fiscal year fund balance at, is to decrease by $350,000. If you look at our approved budget with the various amendments in them, we had planned to decrease our budget by $6.1 million. And so instead of decreasing by 6.1, we're all the way up to a negative 350. So with this in mind, it still gives us that $49 million starting out next fiscal year. I've provided the other supplemental reports. The Senate Bill 68 all funds as of March, that's uploaded there as well. Our board member travel still at $1,581 spent of our $18,000 budget. Our attorney's expenses, $77.7 or $77,000 of $223,000. I also included our significant invoices, any kind of expenses that we have that exceed $10,000. And then we've updated our CARES, our budget dashboard through March. So that is the monthly financials through March. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Any follow-up questions for Mr. Schooneman? No. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schooneman.
And Mr. Schooneman, before you leave, I have a request. I'm sorry I was not able to tell you in advance. Are you able to speak to policy BJEAC, purchasing a credit card use? Could you stay on the line and speak to that?
I will. I'll be here.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right. So we are going to, does that conclude your report, Dr. Thomas, Mr. Schooneman?
Yes, I think that concludes our financials and budget presentations. Thank you, Dr. Gant.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll move forward to item 10, and these are our policies for review. And as you can see, there are a few there, and this is sort of our, we're still sort of working through that initial policy process, and so yes, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and.
I've got it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so we have 4 policies, and I think 2 are really pretty simple. They're more language updates. So we are going to begin with our policy DJEAC, purchasing a credit card use, and have Mr. Schooneman present that information about the reason for this policy update.
Okay. Can you hear me still?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So we've had this policy for many years, and we actually used to have purchasing cards throughout the district. And I think before my time, when Larry Hamill was CFO, I think all cabinet members handed in their credit cards, right? So since that time frame, there have been additional tools and platforms that have kind of been rolled out. And so what I did is I investigated, through our new bank, our new banking partner, Synovus. They've got a platform for purchase cards where you can go in and you can do any kind of limitations that you want on any card. So, what I'm proposing doing is making available a P card to each cabinet member that they can use for their respective divisions. So just one per cabinet member. And then overall, what we wanted to do is update the policy to reflect the limitations that we can put in that new system. So number 3, we're still keeping the daily expenditure limit of $1,000, and per card, so per user, there's going to be the monthly expenditure limit of $5,000. Still no sales tax to be charged on these cards. We're also not going to allow any gift cards or furniture purchases. One of the things that is more challenging than not, even when we've got undesignated funds or flexibility of funds, is providing any kind of snacks or food for meetings. And so this has really been one of the areas that has been more useful for having a card. So what I'm proposing is that we strike through number 7 and just say no gratuity, but just allowing us to use the card, like I said, to purchase snacks or food for meetings using our undesignated funds. Number 8, still no entertainment expenses. And number 9, no transactions that are going to exceed the overall limit. So this number 9, we had to add for Synovus. They said before we can roll out this program, we have to have an overall limit. And they said the minimum that organizations usually do for a P card policy is $50,000. So that was what I had put out in this policy revision. And then one additional control that we're recommending in number 10 is we don't want the credit card to be used in place of the purchase order process. And so we really want to just put a cap or a limit on the number of swipes, or the number of times you can use the card throughout the month. And so right now we're proposing just a cap or a limit of 15 transactions each per card per month.
Thank you, Mr. Schooneman.
Okay.
Are there any questions related to that he can answer for you? Okay, we have a couple of questions, Mr. Schooneman.
So this paragraph down there is travel exceptions. How do those play into the dollar limits? Is that, how do they interact with each other, I guess, is my question.
Lisa, can you type the question? I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Let me say it louder.
Yes, please.
I was just wondering about paragraph C, which says travel exceptions, and as an exception to the above regulations, da, 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 you can use purchasing cards for lodging, airfare, and transportation, et cetera. Do those exceptions for travel let you spend more than 1,000 or more than 5,000?
No, it doesn't. So the limitations on the card, they're kind of hard coded by the software. So there aren't any exceptions. Basically, 1 through 10, that's how the card would be set up. So unfortunately, if you've got a plane ticket that's $1,200, we'd have to find an alternative way to buy it.
So it seems like that paragraph C needs to be deleted then, because it doesn't make any sense. C1,
Because it wouldn't be an option, right?
it's not an
Right.
option.
Yes, we'll make note of that, thank you. Because in most cases, those expenses are paid in advance, so you shouldn't have to use a card. They're paid if there's travel like Ms. Palmer did for us on the GSBA, is paid in advance, right? Yes,
That's correct.
yes. So you're right, so I will make note of that.
So I have questions. So I'm looking under purchasing card restrictions, and it says that the purchasing card may only be used for emergency instructional office supplies and equipment. How would food and snacks fall up under emergency instructional office supplies and equipment? Or be in an emergency situation at all? Or is it that and executive travel expenditures? Is question 1, and then question 2 would be, what would be the process for having this information reconciled with the superintendent and presented to the board regularly to keep a track of what's being spent if the limit a day is $1,000?
I can speak to that. Just the controls that are in place in this. Each month, the maximum of 15 transactions, whoever the budget admin person is that's going to be managing the card, they can log into the portal. They upload their receipts. They upload any kind of notes or instructions for whoever's going to be reviewing it. They also identify the account code to charge. And then each month they kind of ball it up and we'll submit it to the internal auditor who's going to review it, line by line before it ends up going to accounts payable to pay. So once all that process is done, then it's just included in the monthly financial reports that you have.
And I'm sleepy. Let me ask just one more question so you can clarify if I'm foggy. So if my math is right, and there's $15,000 per card per month, and 7 chiefs of staff spend that, wouldn't that get around the policy that we've put in place that would require purchases of $50,000 to come before the board for approval? Would this policy not get around that particular policy?
It's a maximum of $5,000 per month per card, and in the additional restrictions, it's no more than $1,000 per transaction. So in totality, if you've got 5 cards out there that have 15 transactions, you're looking at 75 transactions a month that we're having to code. They're all going to be small dollar items that otherwise would not have been presented to you anyway. It would have just gone through our purchase order process, or more likely someone would have just paid out of pocket for it and then had to be reimbursed. So this is really just providing kind of a more fast track professional route of purchasing, as opposed to someone paying out of pocket and then having to turn around and get reimbursed.
Thank you.
And right now, we have a card, but it resides with Ms. Palmer, so anytime any chief, like if we have principals here for a meeting all day and we're trying to get them box lunches or something, the executive assistants have to all come to her and get the card, and then at the end of the month, when those receipts have to be reconciled, she has to get with each person, and this way would allow each executive assistant to reconcile their own instead of Ms. Palmer having to do them for all departments, and they have to come to her. So if Dr. Watley's doing something with social workers and Mr. Gaskins is doing something with principals, now their own executive assistants would just be responsible, but it is that $5,000, excuse me, monthly limit. And it never, usually I don't think it ever goes, I mean, like it might be $400 or $500, maybe $1,000, like if it's principals once a month, or every other month, to fee, I don't know what that cost is usually like. No? Oh, $300 to feed them once a month. Okay, I don't know if you could hear, so like if they're going on a training and registrations might have to be paid with a card in advance, that would allow that individual executive assistant to do it rather than it all having to go through Ms. Palmer.
So long as you or the superintendent would be able to make sure there's not Chick-fil-A, 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 Chick-fil-A
Right.
up to 15 times a month, then that's my only.
Right, I totally understand. Yes, ma'am. Totally understand.
Additional questions about this policy? Is Mr. Schooneman? Mr. Schooneman, are you trying to speak?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say something.
I got one.
Ms. Gallagher?
So each department head has their own budget, and then they're limited to $5,000 a month.
Yes.
Okay.
So these aren't additional funds. That all this is allowing you to, purchase something outside of the accounts payable process where we would have to cut a manual check. It's still using the same funds, the same fund source. Someone would just go in and code it to wherever they want that expense to land. So you're not receiving any additional budget. It is just a different way to pay.
So is the new policy process for us to move this to the website for public comment as revised? I think that's the next step. So would that be the motion? Oh, we're going to do this tomorrow. We're going to do this next week.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, so next week we
Yes,
will
ma'am,
move
that would
these
be
to
next
public comment.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll move forward to board policy JBA. Well, I'll just turn the floor back over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. I'm looking to Dr. Watley and,
Bye, Mr. Schooneman. Y'all gonna let him go?
right, you can leave, Mr. Schooneman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schooneman.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening.
He probably wants dinner or something, right?
As it relates to policy JBA, we only made this simple change. It's already covered under JB, which is about attendance, so this was almost like a duplicate. So that information is covered in JB. So we just decided to rescind that one. And while I'm at the mic, I can go ahead and do the home McKinney-Vento. Okay.
Are there any questions regarding that? So it was the intent is to rescind this policy to be consistent with the law, and compulsory attendance is a matter of state law, and so no local policy is required for that one. Is that
It
clear?
just doesn't say rescind. It said revise. So that's fine.
Okay, where is it, so we can fix it?
At the top.
Okay, so we need to change that under recommended action, because you're right, under attorney's memo, so we will make that change. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Policy JBC for homeless students, we do not refer to homeless students as homeless students anymore. That's the McKinney-Vento Act, or students experiencing homelessness. So we clarified that language and made sure that was appropriate and up to code. And that's it on that change.
I think that one is correct, it's revision. So
Can we
that-
change the title too then? The title should be changed?
Yes.
The title is going to be changed as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Watley.
You're welcome.
And I think, Dr. Blankenship, are you doing the next one?
Okay, GAK is about background checks, and this change came about because we have our student teachers who come to us from education preparation programs already have to have a background check, and so it seemed to be a duplicate if we require them to also get a background check through us. We've confirmed that the background check they have to undergo is commensurate with the type of background check that we run. So they are in alignment and cover the same points of discovery. So we're just asking that we be able to then use that background check. We still would review and approve, but it would eliminate them having to get a second background check. And then for the other change is around substitutes. In the current policy, substitutes are required to get a background check every year. And because our substitutes are employed by ESS, as well as if we were to employ substitutes on our own again, it seems to be appropriate to have that in alignment with the rest of our employees.
I shouldn't ask this, but EAS does require background checks, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am. They actually,
It's one of those obvious things.
they actually get their background check through us. We do those for ESS, and ESS is actually, this year has paid for those background checks so that, to encourage more individuals to substitute with us. So yes, they do require them.
I think the only thing I'm thinking is, and I definitely would support this going out for public comment, to see what others are thinking. But it just seems like, with the substitute teachers and like if it's temporary employees, it seems like there may be more transition there. Perhaps, I don't know, you may know this better than I do, like compared to like a teacher, right, who has a contract and who may have some type of tenure with the district. And so I'm just wondering, what that means for us missing something. I'm not suggesting that there is something out there to be missed with substitute teachers, but, I guess because it's, it really is sort of contractual work. Yeah. Yeah, so I am curious, like, what other, again, I would support it, definitely going out for public comment and, just sort of curious what others think. I am curious, like, what do maybe other districts do? Like, I don't know if in Jackson, did they, with their subs and temporary teachers that you find?
Every 5 years.
It was 5 years? Okay.
And if you're thinking about transition with subs only being with us for a short amount of time, that's not really going to be an issue because they're going to get the background check when they come to us. If they've been separated for a particular amount of time, I believe it's 6 months, we require them to get another background check.
Do people have to pay for background checks
Yes, ma'am.
through the district?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our policies.
But before we leave that one quickly, what about the mentors? They're getting their background checks through the district too, are they not?
They get theirs through.
Mentors?
I will have to find out about
I thought it was
that
through the
because they're
mentor
not
program, but-
employees.
Yeah. There's another
not sure.
volunteer background check policy, I don't remember what number it is, but we did talk about that at one point too, and it was the one relevant to the dads that wanted to volunteer, whether, so that's in the volunteer, I think that's in the J. Don't quote me. I can dig it out for you, but it's, yeah, there's another policy for volunteers, non-employees that are working in the schools for background checks.
So there are the volunteers, but then I was also thinking, as Ms. Davis was talking about, like the formal mentors, like through the Clark County Mentor Program, who does their volunteers. So that's what we need to find out as well. That's what I was thinking. Okay, so
Who does that?
CCMP does it themselves. Clark County Mentor does it themselves.
No, you do it.
I'm assuming that the ACCPD does the background check for the mentor program.
But it's done through them, not through the school district.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll confirm that.
But yeah, we can confirm that. But I know when I went through, they did a background check on me, so.
I've been telling the students that the district would do that, but that's okay. If I'm wrong, tell me now.
Well, the
Stop
district
telling them.
the district did not do mine. When I went through it, the district did
Okay.
not do my background check.
This is just the CCSD mentor program.
CCSD or Clark County? Are you talking?
Is that a difference?
Not the school district, but you're talking about the private, the
Joe
Clark,
Earl, the mentor program, Clark County mentor program.
but it's not through the school district, it's the,
Oh, I keep saying that wrong, don't I? I apologize. I mean Clark, it is the mentor program.
right, it's the Clark, it is Clark County, but not Clark County School District. But
exactly.
yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes. I'll confirm who does those for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, wonderful. We'll move forward to the personnel recommendations. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Gant. We have the personnel report that is there for consideration to be voted on next week. And we also have a job description, and it is just for 2 nurse clinic assistants. Our numbers currently at the 2 high schools are about 1,300 students, a little over 1,300 at Cedar and a little over 1,700 at Clark Central. And so our nurses are really at capacity. So this would just be assistance to help at those 2 high schools. And you can see the functions and tasks with them doing the MCV4 vaccines, which has been wonderful. We're providing those on site now for families. They're very appreciative of that. We're also doing COVID vaccine and testing, auditing immunizations, and you can see all the things they have to do. But then on top of the students with chronic medical conditions and then emergencies that come up, it's a lot for those high school nurses. So we're just asking, and we have the funding for it, to have assistance with the 2 high schools, and this would be the job description, and that would be for consideration for approval next week as well. Oh, okay, let me work on that. We'll get that to you.
Are others able to see the board report? I know 2 of us. Oh, okay. I was logged in. No. Okay, and then that may be, okay, sorry, I was logged out, so.
You know, we're doing.
Those are my 2 personnel recommendations.
So we're doing the committee, the community forums, right, around the school board candidates. And so I'm still hearing a lot of noise about our turnover rate and how we're just, losing people. I think you've already clarified for us that that is not the situation, that we are not in any unusual turnover experience in the last 3 years. Is that correct?
So in last week's board report, I included some retention data, and the week before that, or a couple weeks before that, I included some turnover data. And so what we have seen over the last 3 years is that our retention rate has mirrored others' retention rate across the state. But for us, 3 years ago, it was 82%. 2 years ago, it was I think 86 or 87%. And that was the year of COVID, basically. Nobody left their, everybody was like, we saw retirements go up, but in terms of people leaving jobs, I think everybody was like, let me just hold tight and see what happens. And then this year, this most current data is 84%. So it's a little bit higher than it was 2 years ago. We are seeing, as we anticipated, more resignations as people begin to look at, things calm down with the pandemic. I think, some people then begin to look in the same manner that they did previously for positions. It is about where we were last year at this time. I don't see a significant increase. We're still looking at between 150 and 200 positions that we'll fill over the course. And we have to also remember that we went all year with approximately 20 to 25 positions that were never filled, that we used long-term subs and retirees to fill those positions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because we haven't talked about it in a while, but I know with your predecessors, whichever one, this board really did everything we were asked to give Human Resources almost a blank check to begin looking for the best and the brightest coming out of our colleges, or looking for transfers from different states and all this kind of thing. I haven't heard that talked about for a long time. Or do you have all the maximum resources that you need to begin the recruitment process? Because you know what your deficits are going to be even before people start resigning and retiring.
Right. So I can tell you that we are working with what we have right now. The amounts that we were given to use for signing bonuses have helped. So we have been able to fill those many of those high needs positions. We're certainly still working to fill all of them, but that has been a help. We have some ideas about how to move forward that we will want the board's support on. It won't necessarily take, all of it won't take additional funding, but some of it will. And these are long-term plans that will help not only increase retention rate, but it'll increase opportunities for teachers to have more leadership responsibilities while staying in the classroom. So it's really helping the professional growth and development of our teachers and helping them stay close to students, which is where many of them want to be.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, and hopefully that's got a healthy increase in this budget for those bonuses. But also, there was a time years ago when, that everything had to be brought to the board before any hiring was done, and so Human Resources was in the situation of maybe having great candidates that fit our demographics, fit our needs, fit everything, and it was in December, and that had to be brought to the board, but by that time, those people had been picked up. So are we recruiting earlier and having them sign on a dotted line even before they graduate?
So we call those early contracts, and so yes, we have done some of that this year. This year, we've been in the situation where when we have done that, they've almost immediately, been assigned to a school because we've had the vacancies. But that is an approach that we will want to continue, and particularly as we get more student teachers. You know, this past couple of years, we have not taken as many student teachers as we might have in the past due to the pandemic. But as we're coming out of that now, we are going to see an increased number of student teachers working in our schools. And that is one of the best places for us to recruit early and to, as you said, sign on those really high potential candidates before other districts have a chance to.
If I could just have one follow-up question, but and I know that that's a big asset, but at the same time, the ethnic makeup is being dictated by the elephant in the room in Athens, Clark County. And so, you know, certainly we're going to have to go far beyond that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we still have our district day strategy in our strategic plan, where we will work to invite high potential candidates to come to our system to visit and, you know, almost as a recruitment day. And then, you know, we're also advertising in other places as well. So not just in this local area. We just did a big advertisement in HBCU Careers magazine, where we had all of our employees who are affiliated with HBCUs or particular sororities and fraternities to come in their spirit wear and take a picture. I think they did that at Clark Central, right? Yeah. So so just trying to put as many positive messages out there as we can about Clark County. That's the other thing that we really need help with right now is having a marketing campaign. So Mr. Swartz, our Executive Director for Talent Management, has been working on that because we have to tell our story. We have to help those who don't know about Clark County or may have heard things, you know, that are not necessarily positive, to know why they should come work in Clark County, right? There are so many great things happening here, and we have to tell that story, and we need help doing that. And so we are working with Dr. Harris's team in communications to put together a marketing strategy to do just that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
So on that, do we have a PR person yet? And do we have a communications plan yet? Because it sounds nice when you say it out loud, but if we don't have people in place to do the work.
We interviewed as recently as last week, and we still do not have a candidate, and it seems to be an issue everywhere because I was in a meeting, actually I was in here for the Georgia Possible celebration and was talking to UGA, and they were saying how many marketing vacancies they had, and while we were discussing it, I received an email from Georgia Southern, and they had 2 vacancies in marketing, like literally while we were sitting there talking about it. So it seems to be a shortage, and I think a lot of corporations right now are putting a good bit of money into marketing and PR, and people can work from home, and so they're paying well and they're working remotely, and we're competing as schools with that. And so we're trying desperately. I met with Mr. Harris earlier today, and he was talking about different places he was going and reaching out, and then we've reached out to some local marketing companies just to see if we can get some temporary help, but we reposted it so it could come back up to the top. Reached out to Public Relations National Association, Georgia Association. So we are trying, and if you know someone, please send them our way because we are desperately looking right now. So.
I have a question about I was looking for a vacancy, well, hoping you had someone. I had a question about the CEO for the Career Academy. Is that a job that we've posted yet, or where do we stand on that?
So, Mr. Swartz has been working closely with Christy Terrell, who is the chair of the Career Academy Board, to get that posted. We needed to get a marketing company in place to help with the advertising of that position, as well as some of our other positions. And so that kind of is coming to fruition at this point, and it should be posted very soon. And when I say very soon, I mean within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. I got one more, but it's not for you, Celine, Dr. Blankenship. So this one will probably go towards Mr. Gaskins. So I'm looking at this document, and I know there is an effort to make sure that 8th grade students take advanced science. There are a lot of science vacancies, science teacher vacancies. How does that translate into student success with a large number of science teacher vacancies that we currently have?
Unfortunately, science is a high needs area across our state, science, foreign language, and special ed. So we work with Selena to try to recruit those individuals early. And then a lot of our middle school teachers, particularly our science teachers, are from non-traditional backgrounds. So we provide them with a lot of training.
Thank you.
That concludes for us. If we have no other questions, we can move on to consent.
All right, we'll move forward to item 12. This is our consent agenda. We'll go through each one, and if someone would like to pull it from consent or have any further discussion around it, you can let us know. The first thing is the approval of the curriculum resource adoption.
I have a question about it before I ask Paul. Has the superintendent been able to review the textbook to make sure that it aligns with equity as that's woven throughout our strategic plan? And if not, I would like to pull it off of consent to give the superintendent a chance to review it before making that recommendation.
No, ma'am, I have not reviewed that textbook. Generally, that happens in curriculum and instruction, but if that is a request, I can do that. Curriculum instruction and our social studies or content coaches work together with the teacher teams on that, but I can look at that textbook with Mr. Gaskin.
Sure, the only reason, when we get further down in future business, I'm gonna ask the board to put the equity policy back on discussion for the next work session, and one of the tenets in that policy is to have all the textbooks reviewed by the superintendent before purchase. So in my mind, I'm thinking if we have that discussion, once the new superintendent comes in, at least this next textbook acquisition would be in line with that policy. So not to put you on the spot, I know that's not regular, I'm just thinking ahead of the game. So I would like to pull that.
All right. We'll move, go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, just a quick question. The kind of a follow-up for that, I would like to know if, because I think the Georgia Department of Education approves at the first level, right? And then on curriculum, and then we get a selection. So that's a part of the equity discussion that's, I know, above our pay grade, but it's something that we need to be aware of, that if the Georgia Department of Education is knocking materials off for that reason, then we need to at least know about it.
Did I review?
Yeah, I think if we're gonna ultimately have the buck stop at the superintendent, we have to give the superintendent the opportunity to do that. And with so many discussions specifically on social studies policies, critical race theory, being conscious, equitable, inclusive, I think especially with that topic, we will all throw a tizzy and fuss at the superintendent should we find out that something is portrayed in a textbook inaccurately. And so if we're going to put that amount of responsibility on the superintendent, I think it is smart ahead of time to make sure that that is something that is reviewed and approved by the superintendent, so that if it comes to that, we can say, we trusted you with this, this was the expectation, and we're expecting you to meet that or hold you accountable. I don't think it's fair to hold a superintendent accountable for something like that if we haven't presented the expectation.
I think too, it goes to the larger conversation in my mind of equity. I don't think, we have we talk about equity and history and things like that, but the reality is one person, I would imagine that we would want to understand what are the perspectives on equity, what is that person's, and of course, certainly not have that done in isolation with the individuals that are teaching the content. But I do think there's some work there, like as we talk about policy and pulling this and then the implications for policy, because I think there's collective work for even us to figure out, what is equity and what is inclusion and what does that look like at this level, right? Does it mean that we only have, certain books? Or does it mean, is it in the, the processes and how things are taught? Is it the content? And so definitely curious about, your perspectives, but I think that's like one of a million pieces. I think even policy is one, because I think we still have to do that individual and collective work as not just as a board, but really as a community, because I don't think we know, quite frankly, what equity is. Or we may all have different definitions of, what equity is in some way that gets lost in all of these, political conversations of such, so.
I'd agree, and I would just want to make sure that we were true to what we were saying with equity, and that we were very intentional in our thought process. I know for my children, I know for the children that I'm auntie to, if they were to read a history lesson that says slaves were bought from Africa, they would get written up, because they would say, no, slaves weren't bought from Africa. People were bought from Africa. And so little bitty things like that, I think as we teach our children to be critical thinkers, as we want them to have a political voice and be socially conscious, we have to make sure that the resources that we are providing them that educational opportunity with align with what we want them to take away from the school district. So that's my little spiel. It may even be a soapbox, but I think knowing that I would be very passionate if I found out that certain words were used or certain viewpoints were used in material. I just think that it would be better if we started to set the policy and the expectation around those and make sure that it's truly woven in between all of the content and everything that we do as we touch these children. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where the work is, right? Because what is it, what is provocative to you is not going to be provocative to me, or it's going to be different. And so what are those words and what are the ways? And I think that's really where, not this, but sometimes I think policy and conversations can sort of seem performative, because at the end it's like, okay, well, what do we do then, right? Like, what is it that we expect? Is it the content, or is it the skill of critical thinking that we want to be able to, have our children look at? And it's probably both, right? Right, accurate information, and the ability to critically look at that and critically analyze the weaknesses with that. And so I agree with you. I just think it's a huge thing to tackle, which doesn't mean that we shy away from it. But I don't, as we pull this, I really do think it is about strategically figuring out where are we going with this thing, with equity, right? And with these critical conversations around history, around, you name it, race and what that means. And so it can't just lie with one person, and it can't just lie with us, but we still have to do some of that individual work to sort of tease out what is equity, because a policy can only go so far. It's going to give us some, some guardrails, but then what does that look like as far as in the classroom and with the curriculum and things like that? So I fully agree. It's just, but it is like, it's work. I feel like it is some ongoing work that is needed by all of us, I suppose.
I think so I agree that there is, I've told you my war story before. I raised my hand and said, no, this book shouldn't be here, and they owned me from that moment on. But what I don't want to see us do is say that the superintendent doesn't have the authority or power to empower these people that are managing this entire curriculum pathway for history, for this grade level. I think we're doing it by grade levels, is that not? So, yeah. So is there direction that we need to have incorporated in that as a board, and that gives us a place to start, I would think, and that would then come back to policy. But I would not want to see us expect the superintendent to read every single document. I would expect her to hire competent people to make decisions about that curriculum. But again, it's just like the extraordinary revelation we had tonight. Wouldn't it be great to have some curriculum reviews by grade level to see exactly what's happening in our schools? Because that's not what we do, right? But it's what we react to. And that's what people have an expectation that we have some control over. So maybe we can start learning more about what's happening in our schools, and we don't have to have these long, long conversations about simple things because we have been educated on what that's all about.
Yeah, having taught U.S. history for a long time, in the 90s, it was a different climate because a teacher could basically teach according to their skill level, which really varied a lot. But there wasn't the political pressures that are being exerted in this state on dictating what a history teacher can teach and not teach. The one thing that I do want to point out in terms of what Mr. Gaskins is recommending is that there's an emphasis on primary sources. I mean, and that is a way of as the Department of Education in Georgia is being required to begin the censorship. I mean, I think we all read the story about Florida where out of over 100 math books for fifth graders, half of them were taken off the curriculum list because they were inappropriate because of critical race theory. So there have been real attempts to channel what an individual school district can choose from. Now, I don't know what's happened here based on the state legislature, but I saw what happened in Florida. But I think, again, by the emphasis of primary sources, I mean, Frederick Douglass is Frederick Douglass, and his words are there. And so insofar as teachers have wide access to primary source material, then, you know, they can kind of push past some of the political pressures that are being placed in our curriculum.
I would just want to make sure that I include the piece that it's not just how things are being taught, but when we talk about not just equity, we also need to talk about the inclusive piece. And this doesn't have to do anything with social studies, but when we look at math, we always hear Johnny has 5 apples. How many apples does Malik have? How many apples does Jesus have? Those children need to be able to see themselves in those lessons. And so we need to be very intentional as a school district about making sure that our materials convey those messages. So it's not just about a certain narrative, but it's also about inclusivity and making sure that our children feel represented so that they can learn, because the research shows when they see themselves, they're able to learn.
I think that's a great charge for that department to have. Thank you.
I just wanted to add something about the recommendation. one of the things that the teachers recommended, we recommended class sets, so we're not buying every student a book because books change over time. And so what they recommended was ebooks and consumable books for some of the same reasons that you all are bringing up, that history changes, perspective changes, and publishers know that if there is something controversial or not in agreement, they want to be able to pivot and update those books in real time. So a lot of the materials that you will see for recommendation are ebooks and consumable workbooks. So if it is not what we want this first year, we can get feedback and they will update it for those subsequent years.
That's encouraging.
All right, so we will pull item 1 from the consent agenda. Item 2, the approval for Clark Middle Temporary Modular Unit for UGA Health Clinic.
Cool. I do have a question. Why is CCSD paying? It says UGA got a grant to serve students for free, but we all know UGA likes research, and they're going to benefit in the long term for doing something that they applied for a grant to do for children that there's a deliverable on the grant. So why is the district paying for that?
So, and I'll let you speak, Mr. Gilbert, but it was my understanding that their grant was for the clinic services, right? Right, so it's for the staffing of the clinic, so we will have physicians there, we will have medical students, and I think they're having to pay some for them to be there. We'll have a dentist there, we will have equipment and supplies there, that a lot of that will come from the grant, but our part here is for the physical space.
Do we benefit from the research that they're doing?
It's not research. They're giving you free health care. They're
It's
not
like the
charging.
Hillsman Health Clinic.
But it's for, but UGA, not CCSD.
No,
What do you mean?
no, it's free for the students and the staff. They're not charging for the services being provided.
So, and I'm sorry, I might have not asked my question clearly. So is this a Clark County School District long-term thing or just under the short-term grant from UGA?
It's long-term, because once we build Clark Middle, we'll have a clinic in there which they will staff.
And then the trailer stays?
Trailer goes. It's just temporary because we don't have space in the school right now. We don't have space in Alps.
And how long will it take to build Clark Middle?
That's a $50 million question.
Okay.
So this is the same as what we have as Hillsman with the Hillsman Health Clinic. The only difference is that at Hillsman, the medical services are provided through the Neighborhood Health Center, and UGA is providing the medical services here. When we built Hillsman, we built the clinic as a part of that, and that's what we will do here. But they have funds to begin providing medical services to students now, but we have to have a place for them to do that.
So UGA will stay, that's what you're saying?
Yes.
UGA stay, but we don't know how long it's gonna take Clark Middle to be built, which is why we're paying for a trailer that may or may not last.
No, we're paying for a trailer until the new Clark Middle is built. So
And
that's
then-
why I said up to 36 months. The goal would be to do it quicker if we can.
So we keep the trailer?
No, it's rented, we'll return it.
It's an expensive rental.
Yes. But it's typical of what we do when we have to put modulars on a project for a temporary basis to house students at grade level, so.
Where will it be put?
Closer to Alps, we're gonna locate it so that it doesn't impact the new construction. So that's part of the opportunities we're working through right now. But it'll be closer to Alps than it will be on that circle between Alps and Clark Middle. It'll be probably on the Alps property side.
Thank you.
But we will be collecting data somewhere so that we know the benefit of having such a facility on our campuses.
Well, there's usually always data, yes, the short answer to your question, yes. So we keep up with data just like at Hillsman, how many students come in, how many staff members come in, you know, the types of, is it earache, is it strep, is it the flu? So this will just keep families from having to go and get services away from campus. The students can get services there, and they do keep up with the number of patients that come in, what those treatment codes are, and what, you know, if they're having to be referred somewhere and that type of thing.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I just want to clarify the reason why I asked, although I know I could send in an email, but there are a lot of people who watch, and if they don't hear that part, that's the important part, then everything is suspect.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm-
So it's a health services clinic on campus for our students and our staff to be equal to what we have on the east side of town, but we have it now on the west side.
So this is students and staff only, or is it gonna be open to families?
Initially, we started before with students and staff, right? Isn't it?
Okay, initially, we started with students and staff, but as with Hillsman Health Center, we opened it up to the community due to COVID. So those things are still on the table, and we're willing to open it up, but we're starting with students and staff, and we can open it up to the community, but we want to first get the space right now. It's really important because we're ready to roll, and we don't have a space until the new Clark Middle is built, and so this trailer would help us start to see students and staff quicker and a place to see them in, not on the green lawn. Thanks.
I think this is awesome. I think there's there's support out there and information that when we can sort of have these communities and, you know, students and families can have access to services, you know, during the day. I mean, it really can make a difference with working parents and things of that nature. And so I think it's awesome that it's going to be at another one of our middle schools, and hopefully over time, that'll be beyond my time here. You know, I know we have some other school, you know, like that are farther out, you know, that may get into more of maybe your rural areas like Coyle and things like that. So I think it's great.
But you were ready to speak on something. I don't want you to not feel like you.
Oh, I got lots of things. You'll be calling me back, so.
Okay, so we are pulling the approval of Clark Middle. My computer here is, okay. We're pulling that. Item 3, the approval of media center's computer purchases.
Consent?
Consent.
Get something through.
Is that consent? All right. Approval of software purchase.
Consent?
That's the one that lets teachers know what students are watching when they're in class.
The software purchase?
Mm-hmm. It's like the stalker one.
And it makes notifications, right? Like if it's some
Yes, so if
mental
students
health.
are searching inappropriate sites, it also gives notifications if students are looking at things around suicide and other harmful behaviors, and that's monitored and reported if there are concerns, yes.
So is it limited to the computers, or are they able to scan those phones too?
Oh, that's a reach.
Unfortunately, we can't scan phones because they don't tie
No,
into our
please, that
network.
was just a joke.
I know it was. You hear I said, unfortunately, I wish we could.
For the parents watching, there is a Go Guardian app that you can put on your child's phone, so just saying.
There you go.
All right, so with that, are we leaving the software purchase on consent? All right. What about the Cedar Shoals construction contract?
Consent.
Consent, consent, consent.
Wonderful, okay. Number 6, approve the architectural services contract for the SPLOST 6 projects.
Pull.
Okay, we're going to pull that. Ms. Davis, are there any questions that you have right now that you could share?
Just that it's, again, it's 6 projects, well, it's SPLOST 6, but how many projects are in that, maybe?
There's 4 major Tier 1 projects in SPLOST 6.
So there will be 4 projects and
Well, each project will have its own contract. So it's just kind of like the attorney's contract. They don't perform on a project, they're not guaranteed the other 4, so it's project-specific. But with DOE, we have to identify a district architect, so this allows us to do that. Very similar to what we did for SPLOST 5. So if, we go along and we're not happy with them and we want to shift gears, we can do that on the next project.
well, what drives my question is, that, again, we're paying for a disparity study, and when we have one architect that's gonna do all of the projects, then that kind of lets everybody know that we're kind of happy with one person, and, again, if they don't do well, they don't get to do more, but it closes the door for other people. So that was my question.
It's kind of like when you find a good mechanic to fix your car, you're going to go to somebody that does a good job and provides you quality service. So that's of great benefit to us. So, and if you look at some of the breakdown of the firm that we want awarded to, it's a woman-owned firm, majority woman-owned firm. They have a lot of, you ask about what they give back to the community. They have internships. They actually have scholarships that students can apply for. They sponsor the robotics team. So there's, they do a lot for Clark County.
I don't know if I saw that, or if I did, I didn't remember it. Okay, but those are important things that we've asked for in all of our contracts, is that they at least provide internships for the time that they're going to be here. So thank you for that.
Is this the company from Lawrenceville that we talked about, we voted on a few years ago? Okay.
Does the SPLOST 6 include the cafeteria for the Career Academy?
Well, depends on the value. This is SPLOST 5 is the culinary program. So we're engaging with a kitchen consultant and an architect in their firm to help us design that space.
And so my other kitchen question, so this one has the Officer Early Learning Kitchen?
No, we did that. That was a design build. That was totally separate.
Okay, but not the Career Academy one?
Correct.
The Career Academy is getting the kitchen though, right?
They're getting the culinary program expansion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so we'll pull this. Any additional questions, though? Right now? Okay. And the Cedar Shoals band equipment purchase?
Can I just say hooray? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Consent?
Okay. All right, so that's on consent. Number 8, the Clark Middle site application approval for the Georgia DOE submission.
Consent.
Tell me a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
This is the standard, so anytime we increase or decrease classrooms, instructional units on a campus, we have to do a new site application, even if we already have a school there. So this is the standard site application that we do on all of our projects. In the past, I've just got Dr. Thomas and Ms. Gant to sign it, and then when I was reading the fine print, it actually says you gotta have a board action. So it's you guys approving me submitting the application. We do risk hazard assessments on the site. We do environmental studies, traffic studies, utility studies and all that gets submitted to DOE, and they say, okay, yep, you can build a school there, even though we already have one there. So it's a hurdle that you gotta jump through, so.
So does that application include a description of what you're doing, or I've not seen it, I'm just curious.
Yeah, we have a site plan. We list how many students, FTEs we're gonna have, things like that.
I'm a neighbor to the new construction, and so conflict of interest, all in absolute transparency, I have a very strong interest in how that new school is going to roll out in that community because of the potential impact on the cemetery. So.
Well, we're staying, I think, at least 125 to 150 feet away from the edge of the cemetery line. We hired not a geologist, but somebody to check for, any archaeologists. There we go. It's late. I apologize, but yeah. So we had an archaeologist, and we've done the due diligence, and we've got a report and a study from them. He's talked about if we start, doing clearing activities, if we have any concerns, call him out, and he can come out and walk the site and look at it. So, And I think in your questions, I provided a response as far as the next community engagement meeting for the local building committee, get you and your folks there. So just contact me and I'll let you know the date. And we'll have more of the site component, developed with the input that we had from the last couple of meetings from the staff and the local building committee for everybody to see as well.
And let me also go ahead and confess, there was a bill in the Senate about a couple of trial projects for middle schools, I think it was, in a couple of states where I think it was either the state or the federal, was it state or federal? At any rate, a couple of senators were sponsoring this bill to look at making the next construction of a school system, more of a community environment. And so there were some extra dollars that might have been coming along with that. So I did write and say, would you please make sure that Athens is included in that? Both of the senators responded that they would. I don't know what the outcome has been, but I think that's a perfect opportunity in that beautiful space. It's huge space to, again, maybe do something to help with the library access and other things of points of interest in that small community. So that's a whole place that has my heart. So thank you for your indulgence, all of you.
All right, so we'll move, we're going to, I think we pulled it, right? Did we pull that or was it consent? Consent? Okay, so no, that's consent. Yeah. All right, we will, let's see, number 9, the Head Start, Early Head Start Continuation Grant.
Consent.
Consent?
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
That's on.
Wait, I do have one question. So for 9 and 10, when we voted on the merger, something to that effect, the two going together, so they're listed as 2 separate things. Are they still 2 separate things, or?
Miss, can you come to the mic?
Or that one?
Yeah, or.
They're listed as separate because we need to now submit your vote to the Office of Head Start and have them approve the consolidation. So at this time, we still need to submit 2 separate applications. Our hope is that we will be able to get that consent in time for us to then submit a single application in June. But by voting on both of them separately, it gives us the opportunity to either submit them separately or consolidate it. But thank you. Good question.
All right, so 9.
Don't go too far, Karen, you have another.
So 9, the Early Head Start Continuation Grant Application, consent?
Yes.
All right. What about 10?
Consent.
This is the Continuation Grant Application Review, so that's consent as well. 11, the Head Start, Early Head Start, is that cost of living and quality improvement supplemental application review and approve intent to apply?
Consent.
Consent, okay.
I do have one more question. So in the application for the 9 and 10, in here it lists, let me scroll right down, community assessment update, self-assessment improvement plan. So the community assessment update, is that made available for public review?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's on the website?
It is, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So item 12, this is the approval of the April 14th board meeting minutes.
Consent.
Consent. And 13, the approval to submit an application for CTAE, locally developed pathway.
Consent.
I just want to add, I think it's great that we are combining with, working with the Classic Center as a laboratory area. I think that's fantastic.
Mr. Kramer is here with us this evening, so we thank you for your 4 hours and 24 minutes.
So I think it deserves a separate vote, so can we just pull it?
Sure. so we'll pull that item. Are there any specific, like, questions or comments that you have right now, Ms. Davis?
No, I know I'm going to support it, but again, it signals a major change in how we do business, and I think it's important for the community to get a chance to hear us talk about that a little bit. So that's why. I'll probably get my hands slapped, but that's okay.
Okay. So we'll pull that from consent. Ms. Palmer? Any additional questions around that we can put out there right now? Okay.
And anything, since they're here tonight, do we have any questions for them regarding that, Ms. Davis, or was it more of just wanting?
More than anything, it signals, again, it's workforce development, it's some of the critical areas that we are talking about that we need.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I said it's workforce development, it's critical areas of need in the community in terms of a new pathway, and the fact that it's one that, is this the first one that we've done jointly with a community partner? No? The welding was with the community, that was the Career Academy that did that one, right? I guess it is.
I think what she's saying is this is the first time we've gone out and utilized a laboratory in a community space versus working with funds that the corporations donated. And we had we had the educational component in our building, but in this case, we're working with the Classic Center and using their facilities as a laboratory location.
I think that's a milestone, so yes, I would like to highlight that when we bring this forward to the community.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Davis.
And I would go ahead and ask, since people have been waiting for 6 hours, how many students can we accommodate in this program? Are we expecting? You can count, that's all.
Good evening, members of the board, superintendent. Let me ask Mr. Thomas to address the question about the enrollment. We have done some recruitment already, so he has the most recent numbers in terms of the enrollment.
Yes, sir. Good evening. So in this upcoming year, we have 18 students who have signed up for that pathway. The pathway is divided once we pass the introductory course, so both courses will be taught. The introductory course will be taught in the fall with 18 students to start out the program.
And then the other two courses would be taking place at the Classic Center?
We'll be in conjunction with them. There'll be days and opportunities where the students will be taught inside the Career Academy, but they also have the flexibility to go down to the Classic Center and engage with some of the laboratories and some of the equipment that they have that we do not have at the Career Academy.
Okay.
Is 18 the capacity?
No, ma'am. 18 is how many students, during our first year of recruitment, that is how many students who signed up. It could be just like any other pathway where you can have a class full of students and be like some of the other pathways. Once they get to a certain limit, we have waiting lists, but as we increase and our enrollment increases, we'll have the opportunity to hire extra staff members so that we can continue to expand. So there's always the possibility to expand the amount of students. This 18 students all that signed up. We did not have to turn anybody away at this time.
I noticed in your report that you have like almost 100 and something students more signed up for the Career Academy for the next school year. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So those 18 that you have already are out of that group. This is going to be the largest class at the Career Academy since its inception, which I think is really fascinating too. So I don't know, is it the new pathways that are drawing more students? How do you account for that growth?
I account for the growth through the recruitment that we have been doing. Coming off of pre-COVID, the numbers were pretty high based on what I could see. That was before my time now, but we have really, as a team, really went out and recruited and getting the information out to our community. I have been in schools, I have been in invited community members to tour the academy and talk to them about encouraging, well, the neighborhood leaders, encouraging them to find us students. We are fortunate enough to be able to hire a full-time special education teacher next year, so that allowed us to go into the traditional schools, and students who otherwise might not be as successful at the academy, and we have asked their teachers from their schools to, now that we have special education support, send students who you may have been hesitant to send, so that population has increased. So we'll count that to our growing number as well. But it's mostly about recruiting and getting the message out to the community and to the students that this is a good thing we have going on, and we like to see the enrollment continue to increase.
Thank you very much.
That was my question around, like where it mentions like how we handle this special populations, but it included in there like students with disabilities and things like that. So it is good. I think I heard you mention something about having some support, the special education.
Yes, this coming fall, this will be the first year that we have a full-time certified special education teacher who will be full-time staff with us, and that'll give her, that person, whether it's her, the opportunity to interact with students and keep a check on their IEP and do pull-out sessions with them and make sure that their accommodations are being met, and being able to understand the IEPs that were written at the home school. And that's a piece that I think has been missing. We have been doing the best we can, but having somebody there who understands exactly what should be happening on a daily basis for these students who are served with IEPs, I think that'll be a plus for us.
And our which means all students will be able to take advantage of this program and this pathway.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
That's awesome.
And I didn't mention this earlier, but since you're here, I was impressed with the ACA report that we covered earlier about, possible expansion into heating and air into construction. So that's really exciting to me too. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you. We're good.
All right, so we are pulling this from consent, but definitely if there are any questions, from what I hear, if there are any questions, if you could send those to Dr. Thomas and we'll get that information for us. So let's see, where is that? Number 14, the high school basketball scoreboards and shot clocks.
That's both schools.
Yes.
I love equity.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so is that consent, everyone? All right, and then the field trips.
Consent. Consent.
That's east side and west side, Ms. Gallagher, and Ms. Dr. Maddox, yes. And Dr. Yeager's excited because it's science-based.
All right, so we're at future business. This is one of the things I think, full confession, I don't think we had talked about it and about including, like going back through our last meeting, because when we did a future business question at last month's work session, or maybe the one before, 2 months, thank you, Ms. Gallagher. The goal is to be able to sort of sift through that information, see where it's covered first in our calendar, like the calendar of what we'll be talking about. If it's not, seeing if we could put it back on a work session agenda. And so I do apologize because we didn't do that. It didn't cross my mind. We talked about it at our last month's meeting, I think, but it just didn't come this month. And so trying to make a public note so that you all can remind us that we need to go back and pull those items too. But I also want to be sure that, I open the floor for any additional future business.
I do want to make sure we put the equity policies and the code mention on there.
I wrote that down too, yes.
Okay. Equity policy.
And the process on committees, and the absence of committees.
I think, was that on the last one or no? I'll have to go back, but if so, we can. It wasn't, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, can you say that so that the public can hear?
She thought we were going to follow the policy of them meeting with Lawrence, I'm sorry, with Dr. Harris, and going through the policy process, but I don't know, some of that is policy, I'm not sure.
But there was an edit. We had to go back because there was an error in one of the ways of communicating, and so they had to go back and edit this so that the process made sense.
Right.
which is
Was it
why
edited?
didn't- Yes,
It was, okay. So we can figure out from there, I guess, because we still have to go back to the original
Right.
meeting and just sort of see where it fits. So that's what we're gonna do, like, if it fits on a work session, and sounds like policy may, and then where we are with, in the absence of committees, if that's more of a discussion we want to have at our June meeting, or if we want to take it into our retreat, or what have you. But that's the goal of like the future business, seeing where it can fit so that we can talk about it. If there's consensus, if everyone is in agreement that they want to talk
And
about
I have
those
those
issues.
notes from the last time, and I think Ms. Palmer wrote them down because we went over them, excuse me, the morning after the board meeting.
All right.
I have one, but I'm exhausted. I can't even articulate it, but I know we'll be talking about the code of conduct, but it has to do with, I need to, if I could add it next week, I need to go back and look at the policies myself. I'm just concerned about the amount of bullying and the process of what happens after that. So I need to collect my thoughts, and I really don't want to say too much on a tired head. Okay.
And actually, I think Code of Conduct is coming up next month, or am I? In June. So that actually may be not just a good time then, but even now, like as we're preparing for that meeting.
And you can reach out to me, or if you just want to go ahead and reach out to Dr. Watley, so you can have some of that conversation prior to the code of conduct discussion. So if there's some areas that need to be considered, we can do that, Dr.
I appreciate that. I will do that. Thank you.
I know one thing that has come up, and this will probably be with the equity policy, and I need to go back and take a look, but attendance, I know that's been something that sort of we've been hearing from a variety of different people, parents, and so attendance, cell phones, things like that. And so I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I do think at some point, maybe it's more, starts off with just a general discussion, maybe, at a work session, because I know previously we had an attendance policy, at least when I was here, and it was one that directly impacted your grades and things like that, and I don't know what it was before then, but maybe as a discussion item at a future work session.
And we did put that in last Friday's board update, just a little overview from Ms. Gillis around the attendance policy and what's been done. We shared some information with TAB today when we met with them, with the Teacher Advisory Board, around attendance. And so that is an area we've been working on, so we can also get you an update on that.
Okay. It'd probably help if I didn't make it through that one. I was stuck in the other two. Yeah, and then I guess I'll just take a look and then just sort of see if it is out there with if it needs to be a policy. Yeah, because I do think that it's out there, and it's, climate and culture and behavior, and when we look at those strategic priorities, but I'll do my work on my end to be sure to take a look at that. Were you going to say something, Dr. Yeager?
I was just going to mention, now that we're on Assembly, it is so much easier to go look and see what the other policies of other districts are. So pick your favorite school district and go see what kind of a policy they have. It's quite nice.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, because I had not done that. I hadn't done any of the groundwork
Go to the upper
there.
right-hand corner, and it's like a menu. You can pick any district you want and then read their policies. It's very helpful.
All right. Well, we will move forward to item 14. We did include executive session. We thought that, in case we had a short meeting, we may have some energy for executive session. Yeah, we are leaving before midnight, so I'm going to open the floor for a motion to go into executive session, and then we can sort of talk in there about capacity to make decisions and all of the other stuff that we need to talk about in executive session. So the floor is open for a motion to go into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis, a second by Dr. Yeager. Any follow-up questions or comments? All right, all in favor of going into executive session for the stated reason, if you would say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that motion carried. I realized I hadn't been saying how many of the motions carried by, so I'm sorry.
That was
They
unanimous.
carried. Yeah. Thank you all.